expressing my opinions, but what we're doing here is bigger than that. These are conversations that need to be had in an unfiltered way. Drag racing's all I've ever done. It's all I care to do. I respect the history, I appreciate how far we've come, but I want more for this sport, and I'll fight for it. It's uncut, it's unfiltered, this is the show of shows. The biggest names in drag racing. No holds barred. This is the great American motorsport, drag racing. Prove me wrong, I'll wait. Hey gang, Wes Buck here, Drag Illustrated Magazine, checking in. It is Wednesday, January 17th, 2024. Hope you're doing well out there. I know it's freezing cold seemingly all around the country right now. Not too bad here today in the greater Dallas-Fort Worth area in the good old state of Texas, but I hope all of you are doing your best to brave this wintry weather and are as fired up about the fast approaching racing season as I am, man. I'm telling you, the next couple of months, the next 50, 60 days, in my opinion, will be largely unrivaled in the history of drag racing. And I know that's a bold statement, but I'm prepared to make a bold statement. When you look at what the next 50 days represent in the sport of drag racing, personally, I couldn't be any more proud. Like, just proud of racers having taken their matters into their own hands, fans being vocal, saying what they want. And to be honest, I think about that a lot in terms of the Drag Illustrated World Series of Pro Mod, that fans asked. That's really what this is all about. The fans are the boss. That's something I had an epiphany last night. Last week on the show, we spent a good bit of time talking about how the struggle that it is for people to identify as race fans, specifically in drag racing. And I've really labored over this because in the past, I've convinced myself completely that it's been because racers want to race. Nobody wants to identify as a fan because they'd rather race. But last night, sitting down and I watched the new episode, the first episode of, I believe, season 4 of True Detective. This is something that Mike and I go way back on, and I'm sure we'll discuss. I'm not sure if he caught the episode last night. We got to book club it a little bit. But anyways, I was sitting there and I was thinking to myself, I think people don't want to identify as race fans, not because they don't want to be a race fan, but because that experience really hasn't evolved. I don't think it meets the expectations of a fan in 2024. I think that we've kind of treated fans much the same way today as we have since the 60s, right? Every ticket's a pit pass. The cars or the stars come out, sit in the grandstands, and take in a day of racing. And I admit that I think that's enough for a hardcore. That may be enough for someone who has an interest or has some connections to our sport, but I don't know that it's enough on its own in 2024. I think that fan experience has to evolve. And really, it's us, it's promoters, it's the industry, it's this community that has to answer to that and has to rise to the expectations that are set by consumers in 2024. I mean, people expect a lot. Look no further than your relationship with Amazon or telling your Alexa to order you some milk or whatever that'll be same day delivered. I mean, the consumer expectation across the board is at an all-time high. And I think in drag racing, when I really thought about that question and tasked myself with trying to get to the bottom of it, last night during a murder mystery, I came to the conclusion that it's on us. Who am I to stand here and say that these fans need to do more, they need to be more engaged, or they need to find way? No, it's on us to attract them, to be a magnet. And the sport of drag racing, it's magnetic, man. When you get around this sport, it's really hard not to get roped in. But again, we've got to find a way to get new fans, and we've got to raise the bar, and we have to provide more value when you buy a ticket than just entrance to the property. And I think that we collectively, Drag Illustrated, Bradenton Motorsports Park, also the Professional Racers Owners Organization, there's all of our sponsors, there's a ton of people that are involved and have contributed significantly to these two events that are going to take place over the course of the next month and a half, 2 months at Bradenton Motorsports Park in Florida. I've got a couple of things. First and foremost, I hope the facility I hope I think we're going to burn this place to the ground. I got to be careful when I say that because Facebook and all these social media, they take everything literally. But the fact of the matter is, I mean, we're going to change the landscape of drag racing forever, 2 times inside of the next 2 months. And I couldn't be more proud of it. And it starts with an incredible fan experience because I said it to start the show. The fans are the boss, and we have to find to do better for our bosses. And that's something that we're delivering with bands. We announced the Vindies are going to be joining us Saturday night. This is a strong musical outfit that are really on the come up. Super excited to have a significant name leading the music charge at the Pro Superstar Shootout. Going to the World Series of Pro Mod, we booked Lainey Newman, who has become a real character that's associated with Texas Motorplex down here outside of Dallas. Sorry, I drew a blank. I almost called it a NASCAR track, which would have been almost unforgivable. But Lainey Newman has really planted his flag, leading the entertainment charge and kind of setting the tone during this Texas Stampede of Speed during the NHRA national event that comes up every fall. So we brought Lainey in to improve and grow upon that entertainment experience that'll happen at the World Series of Pro Mod. More fan interaction, more games, and more on camera moments and opportunities for our fans, and more improved access and improved experience from start to finish. And I'm just, I've taken this seriously, and I'm very proud of the effort that's been made to raise the bar for fans, because we want to create an environment where you can't not be there. You can't help but want to be there. You can't help but fly across the country or fly around the world to be a part of these events, because the experience, not just the on-track product, but the entire event experience, from parking lot to the exit at the end of the action, that experience, every touch point matters. And I think it's going to be cool to see the fruits of our labor and see the reaction from the masses. But we've got to grow this fan experience for our drag racing fans, especially. Not only do we need to take care of the incredible fan base that we have, I mean, that's something that is oftentimes a little bit overlooked because we spend so much energy talking about growing and new fans, but we have an incredible fan base that deserves more. And we're here to answer that bell. And I want to start today's show, bring in my cohorts here. Glad to have them, the whole gang, back together while we discuss one of a pressing issue in the sport of drag racing, and a pressing issue amongst Doorslammer drag racing aficionados. And that was Stevie Jackson's participation or not in the 2024 running of the World Series of Pro Mod. So while we dive into this topic, let me introduce my co-host here on the Wes Buck Show, my main man, Mike Carpenter, partner in crime, right-hand man here at Drag Illustrated, and of course, the one, the only JT Hudson. What's up, boys? You doing good? Huh? How
you get main man and right-hand man, and
yeah,
I think I gave you the one.
He's got nothing
only
left. He's got nothing left for you, bud.
I mean, do you not think that's a fair, the one and only? I'm very thankful personally. There's only one. Mark Cuban says about an NBA team, you can have one knucklehead because they'll kind of fall in line. They can't cause too much trouble, but you can't have two because they'll team up and grow.
We definitely have our knucklehead.
Yeah.
But man, it's good to be back. We're back. What's that? We are back. What is that? That's from The Hangover, right? We are back.
We are back. Yeah, man. No, I mean, it's great.
It's been a while, man.
It has been a while, especially for you. I mean, you've had the bio flu. You've had, I don't know, some sort of forehead growth syndrome.
No, I've had that. Diagnosed with that at an early age.
Relation to coneheads.
Yeah, I'm glad to have you guys back, man. I tell you, for me, this deal, I'm really proud of all of the stuff we have going on right now. Like, we got a lot of irons in the fire, and we're making progress. But this show has really been the tip of the sword for us the last several years. 330 episodes today. We've been doing this since like 2015 or soon or earlier. I can't actually remember when JT and I went live that fateful day for the first time, but I'm blown away by what this has become. Right. And what an honor and a privilege to get to talk about drag racing every week, every day, work on this show, work on the sport of drag racing, and then share it with all of our friends in the drag racing community. It's a pretty amazing deal, dude. So glad to have you guys back.
Yep. Great job, JT. JT really started the whole video movement.
Not really. I kind of thought he was crazy at first, but
no,
it's just so hard. It was like, especially back then, like, I mean, even selfies that wasn't even really a thing at the time, I don't think. So, I mean, it's super hard to record yourself or go live, you know.
You do have to get used to
back
like
then
staring at
especially.
yourself. That's the biggest thing of this show. And I mean, I guess that applies to a lot of things now because it's like everybody's doing it now, doing selfies. We're much more used to like recording ourselves. But
Yeah.
back then, like what JT said, like that was odd to
It was
yourself.
odd. Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, I think that first episode, I was wearing like a button-down shirt,
Gotta be
slacks.
professional.
Like, I dressed up, and it's like
Like
so
you're going
funny.
on the news. They're gonna have
Yeah,
you a special
that's how I
guest on the
felt.
6 o'clock news.
That's how I felt. Like I was going on KTVO or
Anchorman.
WFAA or something. And now it's like throw on whatever Racers Club shirt I've got that's clean and rock it, man. It's funny how it's gone. It really is.
It is.
All right. Well, so first and foremost, let's get right into it. Let's talk drag racing, guys. I see some great comments here. Hey, guys, help us spread the word. Make sure you subscribe to the channel. Stop whatever you're doing. Click subscribe down there. We just crossed the 12,000 subscriber threshold, and we would like to see those numbers continue to grow. So help us. Call a friend. Tell a friend. Share the show. Share a tip or a clip you see from the show. Help us spread the gospel of drag racing. Guys, Stevie Fast Jackson, I said it this morning on social media that this man's a needle mover. No matter where you stand on him, and he's an oft polarizing figure, but at the end of the day, he is a difference maker out here. He has an incredibly dedicated fan base, a seemingly ever growing fan base. It's diverse. He's competed in a lot of different classes, which I think has really helped grow his fan base. He built kind of a name for himself in the radial tire world and took that into 8th Mile Pro Mod, carried that on to a championship and NHRA Pro Mod competition. And now we see him perhaps refocusing some of his time and attention on outlaw drag racing. We announced this morning that Stevie Fast Jackson has officially accepted his invitation to the 2024 World Series of Pro Mod. I'll admit, this has been going on in the background for a while. We've been having internal discussions because we have more cars and more interest in this event than we can really facilitate. And we have to be mindful of who gets an invitation based on their availability and their willingness to commit for 2024. And I wasn't sure of Stevie's plans. And as I was getting inside information that the car was coming along and he was going to be close to ready and perhaps ready and would more than likely be able to have a car at Donald Long's Lights Out event in February, that kind of gave me the confidence to say, okay, we can plan on Stevie being there. We had a couple of conversations, send over the invite. One thing leads to another, and we got Stevie Fast Jackson back in the mix. He's a 3-time World Series of Pro Mod competitor. He competed with us all 3 years out in Denver, 17, 18, and 19. And to be honest, him and I have had many conversations dating back several years about what could happen if this event arrived at a prime time on the schedule and at a prime facility that serves a lot of purposes for a lot of racers. And I think we saw that magic. We saw that lightning in a bottle in March of 2023. And I think we're about 50 days away from seeing it again ×2. Guys, immediate reaction to that news of Stevie Jackson re-entering the fold at World Series.
It's awesome.
Yeah, I think it was huge, man. I mean, I think it's like one of those things you don't know what you've got till it's gone. And with Stevie being gone for, I think he said almost 2 years, I think like 21 months with his neck injury. And he's been shuffling the deck as far as cars, sponsors, teams, the whole deal, and getting a car together to come out and run. I think it's interesting. He's going to run radial races and big tire races, pro mod races with this car. And I know on the show last night on Shake Bake, they had Donald on there, and Donald wasn't too happy about Stevie kind of switch hitting here, going back and forth. He is going to debut the car at Lights Out, but then immediately put slicks on it and come run with us at World Series of Pro Mod. So, and again, I think that speaks to what Stevie is about, is just, wherever the big hitters are, wherever the big money is, wherever the big draw is, he's not afraid to dip his toe into that water. So we'll see. A comment I saw that I thought was funny was he could have this car paid for by March if he goes out and does well and wins at Lights Out, wins our race. He could be on a roll to start the season. So definitely a lot to look forward to there.
JT, I know you're perhaps one of the big. Are you the founding member of the Stevie Fast Jackson fan club?
Oh, I think he had a pretty good one, because didn't he have he had a pretty good following from the grudge stuff too, before. So I mean,
oh, there's no doubt.
Yeah, but I don't know. I mean, you can't hardly have World Series of Pro Mod without Stevie, right?
It was weird last year.
Everybody, that's the guy everybody wants to beat.
Yeah.
It
was a bummer not to have him there last year.
It was a bummer.
And he also did race with us in Orlando as well. I know that was a different branded event, but he was there for those events and actually crashed a car there in Orlando. So I was talking to Stevie at the Burnouts for Kids deal down at Carolina Dragway last month that Nate Prater put on. And Stevie was joking that no one has spent more money to run our events than he has, between towing all the way to Denver, tearing stuff up there, crashing that car. So he's been committed to our events, and it's good to have him back.
I'm glad to have him back.
It'll be interesting too, like as far as like shake and bake goes. Like how long are those guys going to be buddy? Because I mean, Lyle's going to be a problem for those guys, I think, in this ride this year.
Before we go, I agree with you wholeheartedly, and I want to touch on that. But first, I was wondering, do you guys think, I mean, we saw Stevie, I believe, make an effort to qualify an NHRA competition at the Las Vegas final national event of the year, kind of a sister car to Sidney Frigo's NHRA Legal Pro Mod. But I'm just curious, in mixed martial arts and boxing, ring rust gets talked about. How helpful will it be for Stevie Fast Jackson to have this opportunity to go shake that rust off at Lights Out, albeit in a different, with a different setup? I understand there's a lot of changes to the car that'll be made, but just being in fierce competition before World Series, because do you guys agree that would be a very tough one to return at without any prior track time, competition time?
You're going to have Donald really pissed off at you now if you're saying his race is
I'm not saying it's a warm up. I'm saying that I think it would be worth, like, if he were going somewhere to a test session. I talk about this all the time, but testing, it's no different than sparring. It's much different. You have to test. You have to spar if you want to race and you want to compete, you want to fight. But you have to be in those competitive environments. And that's why I think, I'm actually giving kudos to Lights Out, because I think that event has the necessary atmosphere. It has the necessary level of competition to get a guy in the mindset to run for big money, because let's not gloss over the fact that these guys do not often race for 6 digits. I mean, this is a rare air.
Yeah.
I'm really proud of that. I mean, in 2017, with the inaugural Drag Illustrated World Series of Pro Mod, paying $100,000 to win winner take all, it was historic. That level, that dollar amount was historic. It was Donald that followed us with the $101,000 to win Sweet 16, which has largely dissipated since then. So my point is, I'm proud of having introduced this notion of 6-digit winners checks going out. But you have to admit, and we have to acknowledge, we must, give reverence and time to the things that are significant. Racing for that amount of money and having it be winner take all, it absolutely changes the dynamic dramatically. I mean, you are going up there, and it is a much different thing than having the potential to win $1,500 or $5,000 and maybe cover your diesel fuel and hotels. It's a totally different thing to talk about going home at the end of the night with $100,000, not to mention all the ancillary things that happen to the person who wins the World Series of Pro Mod. I mean, look at Spencer Hight. We can talk about this in a separate segment, but I mean, this man, a star was born with Spencer Hight at the World Series of Pro Mod, qualifies 32nd, hole shots his way to the final, takes out Kurt Stedding in a final round that they can hang their hat on for the rest of their lives. Both Spencer Hight and Kurt Stedding had performances in Bradenton last spring that they can hang their hat on. That was a drag race for the ages. We've seen Spencer go on to get partnerships with Redline Synthetic Oils, a partner of ours here at the show. We signed him with Racers Club brand. He's in a video game and earning revenue from his appearance in a video game. He made his NHRA Top Fuel debut. I mean, 2023 was an absolutely insane way to run the year, or to have the year go for Spencer Hight after winning in March. So anyways,
he's on the map now. And even Stevie last
massively.
night, I don't know what the exact comment was, but Stevie even made like a semi call out, or said he was going to call out someone like Spencer Hight once he gets his car running. So now he's on that level where he's a target for somebody like Stevie. So that to me says a lot about what you're saying also.
Spencer Hight this guy has And I don't want to discredit anything because it's not like Spencer's brand new to drag racing. He's been around the block, his family. I mean, it's a generational endeavor for Spencer Hight. But what happened in 2023, we mustn't overlook. We saw a star born, and we saw someone become a legitimate contender across the board. Wherever he goes, his name carries that those letters on an entry list carry a different level of significance and a different weight post World Series of Pro Mod win. So I bring that up just because to demonstrate how significant this moment is. And even someone like Stevie, who has accomplished so much in the sport of drag racing, this is one of those items that has eluded him. I think Stevie may have said this on the show last night, but he's had the car to beat many times before. I would argue 3 times in a row, 17, 18, and 19 in Denver, Colorado, out on Thunder Mountain. Stevie had the car to beat, and it went awry. Parts failure, red light, something, and it was almost always an early stumble. He would look flawless in testing, proof of my earlier comment or evidence of my earlier comment, but it would always go awry, typically in that first round of eliminations. But again, it points to how different this environment is than anything else, that exists in the sport of drag racing.
I agree. And what you talked about with practice and everything. I mean, nothing gets you ready, like game time. I mean, when you're in a game, you can practice all you want to. And yes, you'll go back to some of your fundamentals that you learned from practicing, but the game time, the pressure and everything involved, I mean, there's nothing to replace that besides getting in a car and getting out there and making passes in competition.
You've got to do it. So again, to give credit to Donald Long's Lights Out event, that event, to be honest, I think exists in rare air. That is one of a handful of events that exist in drag racing that have a significance beyond their sector, right? Like, in my opinion, there are the NHRA US Nationals kind of cuts through whether you're an NHRA guy, a PDRA guy, an NMCA guy, a street legal guy, a class racer, and that race has significance. I believe it's recognized across the board.
The people that are lined up and everybody up on the starting line. I mean, yeah.
Lights out. World Cup finals. I mean, there are a handful of these events that just hit different. World Series of Pro Mod is one of them. And my point really there wasn't to downplay or diminish the significance of Lights Out. It's to acknowledge what a perfect springboard that event will be. And the coolest thing, and this is something that I'm glad to see some of the things, and I don't want to get ahead of myself, and we can revisit this later, but I expected to see this for a long time. I think that what Stevie's doing with a multi-purpose Doorslammer, I think this is going to become commonplace. I'm actually surprised. I mean, we're seeing it happen slowly where, there are situations where a team's in a position to have 2 cars. They've got a legal car, or they've got an event or series specific car, and then they have this outlaw car that is a little more nimble, right? And they have that freedom and flexibility to change a setup and go a different direction or experiment with something. But what we're also seeing are racers like Stevie Jackson. I think Frankie the Madman Taylor falls into this category, where they've got a car that works really well in both configurations. And I've been we saw this start.
You kind of have to, right now. I would
want to.
With the car that it's going to take to enter into Radio versus World or whatever you're going to run over there. I mean, really, there's several classes anymore that it's going to take an expensive ass car. And if you're only going to have a couple of events that you can run that car at, you're going to need to figure out something where you can run this car somewhere else, or vice versa. If you're running Pro Mod and you want to go down and try that stuff too. So, it only makes sense.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I think we will see an ongoing move towards this kind of different rear end setup for the configuration. Like, there's a couple things when you build these cars that are set in stone, engine placement, things like that. But the back of the car, I've seen teams have one that probably doesn't get the respect they deserve, and we should mention them while talking about the World Series of Pro Mod, is Jason Lee and Eric Gustafson. They have done a phenomenal job with that white 69 Camaro, the Coast Packing Company Camaro. And that car can be switched from RVW trim and be a threat, be a high 340 player, definitely a threat to win, has won with Jason Lee behind the wheel, but they can also dive right into PDRA Pro Boost trim. They can go into Outlaw Pro Mod trim for events like World Series, Snowbird Outlaw Nationals, US Streets, and be competitive. And I think that, I mean, I suppose it could be argued that picking something would always be the preferred route. But in a world where there are limited opportunities to race for big money and to race on a grand stage in front of a massive crowd, those are fairly limited. So I think it makes sense to have a car
and Stevie,
that you can swap
Stevie's
over.
done that for a long time now.
Yes,
you know, and didn't Marty Robinson do it with Bad Fish?
A little bit.
He had it. I mean, I think he had like a crate where he could basically swap that car over.
Daniel Ferris did that a while.
Yep.
With that blue Mustang, that Larry Jeffers Race Cars built Mustang. They switched that car over from RVW trim, actually set the world record with that car, and then would switch it to big tires. Yep. So Kevin Rivenbark has done the same thing when he was driving for Galat Motorsports. They did a similar deal where they had a car, that white 69 Camaro that was beautiful, probably one of my all-time favorite paint graphics schemes on a Doorslammer. Real modern looking, the car I'm talking about.
Mm-hmm.
That car could easily be switched from front running big tire setup to front running small tire setup. And I think we're going to see more and more of that, especially as these opportunities to race. I mean, if you look at Bradenton alone, you've got the opportunity to race for roughly $200,000 over the course of 3 months. I mean, if you hit the Snowbird Outlaw Nationals, US Streets, and World Series of Pro Mod, I mean, you do well, I mean, that's a life-changing run right there. And I've actually talked to several racers who have inquired about a series or turning it. And I'm just talking here, but like those 3 races alone could be enough for a handful of drivers. I mean, this might be a great segue. Actually, before I dive into our next conversation, and I'll leave you with this, guys. Stevie Jackson on the entry list at the World Series of Pro Mod, joining the fray, potentially being one of those 32 heavyweights that will go battle for $100,000 on Sunday, March 3rd, 2024, a day that will live forever in infamy. I think it changes the dynamic of the World Series of Pro Mod. As much as I was torn about the retirement of Tricky Ricky Smith and losing him as a competitor at the World Series of Pro Mod, I'm really glad to see another major name dive into the fold and come in with a vengeance. I don't think there's any doubt, all things considered, everything we just discussed, that Stevie Fast will be a threat at the 2024 running of the World Series of Pro Mod. Guys, let's pay some bills here real quick. I want to remind you that each and every episode of the Wes Buck Show is made possible by way of our friends at Stroud Safety. Stroud Safety is known for their top quality racing safety equipment, from drag chutes and seatbelts to fire suits and blankets, all 100% made in America. Log on to StroudSafety.com. Make sure you tell them we sent you. New products coming from our friends at Stroud almost all the time. We saw them roll out a game-changing fire boot in 2023 to head into 2024. We've seen a head and neck restraint come from the team at Stroud. So it's incredible what they're doing for the sport of drag racing. It's incredible what they're doing for drag racers and drag racing events. Keeping you guys and gals safe is of paramount importance to all of us. So we tip our cap to the gang at Stroud for all they do to support the sport of drag racing. Guys, getting into this second topic, and it's a little bit of a solid segue here. Actually, I'm gonna bounce around. Let's talk a little bit of NHRA. We've got the Pro Super, the Skag Power Equipment Pro Superstar Shootout presented by Johnson's Horsepowered Garage. Just a month away, coming up again at Bradenton Motorsports Park. Less than a month away. Incredible fan opportunity. If you haven't got your tickets, you can log on to superstarshootout.com and secure those today. We are blown away by advanced ticket sales. If this event and the ticket sales are any indication of what this industry wants, what this community wants, I'm very, very happy, and I think we're going to deliver in spades. But one of many storylines that exist headed into the Pro Superstar Shootout are our lineup of drivers for Top Fuel and Funny Car. We are seeing some musical chairs in the Nitro world. Absolutely insane. Most recently, we heard this week that Tim Wilkerson would be retiring and turning over driving duties of the Skag factory equipment the Skag Factory team funny car to his son, Daniel Wilkerson, continuing the changes inside that camp. Dean Marinas will move into a crew chief role for the Chad Green team that operates under the Wilkerson umbrella. So guys, just Mike, I'll start with you. Kind of immediate reactions. Daniel Wilkerson is a fan favorite. He's verbose, he's witty, he's high energy, has a lot to say.
Yeah,
how excited are you to see him on the top end after a run? I mean, I think we're about to see some of Amanda Busick's best material ever.
Yeah, he's great on the starting line after they have something happen or a big run. I'm looking forward to it. Like you said, there's been a lot of musical chairs in the Nitro ranks, and we've been kind of exposed to that more than ever because our race now, or the Skag Power Equipment Pro Superstar Shootout presented by Johnson's Horsepower Garage, now precedes the start of the NHRA season. So normally you'd have this stuff happening. NHRA would be the debut for this, but this is actually a lot of this is going to be taking place at the race in Bradenton, besides the Tony Stewart deal, which Leah Pruitt is going to be, I guess, wrapping up her career for this moment to start a family with that event in Bradenton. Then going into the season, Tony's going to take over that car. But we've got a lot. I mean, I hate to jump around and kind of get off the topic of Wilkerson. We've also got the Robert Hight news that came out yesterday with Austin Prock. So we've been kind of building some promotional materials and some marketing. The people over at Flow Racing have been producing the Road to Bradenton series that they're rolling out as we get close to the event. But some of the stuff that we've already kind of banked on, now it's shuffling around. So it's interesting to keep up with and to see these changes happening. And I feel like it's actually happening a little bit quicker than I think maybe it normally would. I think we see some of this sort of roll out a little bit slower. I think it backed up. We saw some of this happen around PRI, and now it's happening or continuing to happen in early January. So to me, it's just the fact that this race is now on the map in early February. What does that do to the timetables for these announcements and for these changes?
Yeah, I mean, I think it changes the dynamic pretty intensely. I mean, one of the biggest concerns we had during the planning phase, early planning phase of the Pro Superstar Shootout, was parts availability, teams being ready, teams being assembled, knowing some of the moving parts and knowing some of the announcements that were coming down the pipe. And I think we will still see more, to be honest. But you make a great point. That was huge news around the sport of drag racing earlier this week. And I want to talk about kind of how it affects all sorts of different people. But Robert Hight making it known that he would be stepping out of the Cornwell Tools Chevy Camaro funny car under the John Force Racing umbrella, turning over the keys to Austin Prock, which is a incredible story and an incredible young man that I believe drag racing needs competing at a high level. But what is this? What do you take away from this, Mike? I mean, there's clearly a health issue. I personally, I would love to know a little bit more about that. I think the fans deserve to know a little bit more about that. I respect people's privacy for sure, but I think the sport of drag racing loves Robert Hight. I think Robert Hight has a solid fan base. He's a guy out here that matters. He's a champion. He's a championship contender perennially. And I'm just curious about, are you reading the tea leaves at all here? Do you feel, I mean, because there's something magical. I mean, it's Austin Prock being tuned by his father, Jimmy Prock, who has his brother working on the car. I mean, that's a pretty magical setup.
Yeah, we thought Austin was going to be sidelined. And we had the deal, the shuffling going on at John Force Racing. But to me, it's a youth movement. Both the Tim Wilkerson and this announcement. Obviously, you don't want it to come because of health reasons. But Robert Hight and Tim Wilkerson are not getting any younger. They're both in great shape and still fantastic drivers and competitors. But why not give these young guys a shot? And I think that it's good for the health of the sport. You always say drag racers eat their young, or really it seems so difficult for the older generation to give up that seat to an up and coming driver. So when things like this happen, I can't help but take away a positive from it. Health issues aside, that it's almost making the move before it had to be made out of necessity. to a younger driver. And I think that happens a lot in other forms of motorsports and not so much in drag racing. So I'm trying to take a half glass full approach to it and look at it from that vantage point.
I agree. I think that you have to, because that's something that I was also thinking about last night while watching True Detective. I still want to touch on that, but we can do it later.
I haven't watched it. I got to catch up. I haven't seen any of this new season.
Only one episode's out. Jodie Foster's in it.
It can't compete with the first season. This deal's been kind of going downhill since the first season.
We can rapidly downhill. We'll talk about it. But on that same note, I think that our sport, there's such a strong focus in drag racing on preserving our history that I sometimes think, I mean, what's that cliche? Your rear view mirror is smaller than your windshield for a reason. I think that's a conversation that doesn't happen enough in the sport of drag racing, and it kind of proves your point. And it's demonstrated by your point there, Mike, that we have to be looking at the next crop of stars and where we can find them and how we're going to find them. And that's something that this is representative of. I think there's clearly a movement clearly an effort from John Force Racing to keep these young guys out there. And I look at the lay of the land here and knowing the inner workings of some of these teams and new sponsors and this sponsor and that sponsor going away and this guy's coming in. I'm sure there were conversations about who it makes sense to have in a car. And they cast their vote for Austin Prock right there, that they cast their vote that it's important to keep him in a car because it probably, I'm sure there was a way to absorb that team's, that car sponsorship funding into another program. So I think it speaks to the willingness to invest that John Force Racing has by keeping, not just putting that car on the sideline like they very easily could have done and likely would have been justified in doing so. No, they're going to spend that money. They're going to go to 22 NHRA national events. They're going to go to the Pro Superstar Shootout. They're going to go to Norwalk's Night Under Fire. They're going to do what they do, and they're going to put Austin Prock out front. I think this is a fantastic thing. There's going to be a lot of storylines come from this. A lot of storylines come from Daniel Wilkerson's involvement in racing at a high level. I'm excited to see Daniel. I'm amongst the biggest Tim Wilkerson fans. That story resonates with me. A repair shop owner in Springfield, Illinois. I've called, talking to him on the phone. There's shop phones ringing in the background. You know that sound.
Oh yeah,
Mike, when the old shop phones ringing and people are coming and going, and hearing Tim on the phone multiple times, like interacting with customers, answering the shop phone, answering questions, ordering parts, while also talking to me and getting ready to head out and compete at drag racing's highest level.
Well, it's been cool to see him.
Amazing story.
I mean, he had funding. I think he had decent funding, but now I feel like he's got significant funding, more than he's had in the past. And that's a unique way to look at it also, is just what has that done to the opportunity for Daniel and to the team, and back to the JFR deal, as far as like the consolidation of sponsors there and sponsors leaving and going and kind of shuffling what cars are going to be out there. Whereas they could have, like you said, parked that car. And I think that, I guess I didn't see the details in the release about what funding or what backing will be on that car for John Force Racing, but I believe at some point didn't AAA was no longer a full-time sponsor on that car.
I think it will largely be the Cornwell Tools car. Yeah. That's kind of the way I interpreted it. And I mean, this is good news. Like I said, I think it's important that I think there's a pathway to get Robert Hight back out here, but I don't think Robert Hight's ship has sailed as far as his potential to attract new fans.
He was competing for a championship this year. I mean, he's always right there. When we talk about getting into the countdown and guys that kind of are lurking around in that usually top 3, but top 3 to 5, he's always there. So
he's a guy that people cheer for because he's relatable. I know that. I mean, arriving at the president of John Force Racing, I mean, you're a pretty elite individual. You're a high achiever. But Robert Hight represents someone who chased the dream and achieved the dream and is living the dream and did it in a lot of challenging ways. I mean, he worked on these cars. He drove trucks. He hauled parts. He cleaned parts. He worked as part of the crew for years and years and years before he got an opportunity to drive the car. And I think that story, that resonates with people, especially when you talk about what we discussed earlier, this incredible fan base that already exists in drag racing. They want to see a guy who's got dirt under their fingernails and grease on their knuckles. That's the guy that they want to see climb behind the wheel of a car. And I mean, and it's different strokes for different folks, but I think that story is significant in the sport of drag racing, and I would love to see it continue. How much do you think it will impact, Mike, the performance of some of these cars? Let's talk specifically. This was a point that was made yesterday during WFO, Joe Costello's podcast with Alan Reinhart. Alan Reinhart, I think, made a great point that it's going to be interesting to see how the performance of that team improves, because it's already good with Tim's kind of mind being split in a couple of different directions. I mean, I don't think we probably give credit to the guys enough that carry both of those loads, the tuning load and the driving load. I think, and that's not to diminish Daniel Wilkerson's.
It's
so
very
rare
today.
It's so rare. And I think it's a significant challenge. I mean, Warren Johnson, pro stock legend, would tell you that we're in a specialist time now. It's a new era in drag racing where you don't really have the jack of all trades as much as you have people that are specialized, that are especially good at what they do. Especially in Nitro. And I think it would be interesting to see how a team that was already in the mix, winning races, running well, throwing down some serious runs out there. How is Tim Wilkerson? I mean, what kind of hot rod is Daniel going to have? I mean, if he can answer the call as a driver, which I believe he can and will, I don't know how you don't. I mean, that's a top 10 car, probably a top 6 car out the gate from the jump.
And Daniel's been doing the tuning also for the team cars, so he's going to have a little bit more of the split duty now. But this team has been on the come up, and I think the Chad Green performance at the end of the year speaks volumes about that also. And I mean, not to jump off of Daniel again, but Chad Green, man, he's got to be he's high on my list for favorite Nitro drivers right now, because this dude is going to jump out of that car and get into a pro mod and run World Series of Pro Mod. We were worried at first when he started, he was having success this year. And, you know, you could tell like this is going to turn into a legit deal. He's contending. He's going to say, no, I'm focused.
His son Hunter's getting his A fuel license. Like clearly
he thought
something's happening.
Right. We thought, okay, he's going to be done with Pro Mod. He's going to be full-time, all in on, doing his best with this Nitro deal. And we called him, hey, you in for World Series of Pro Mod? Hell yeah, man. I mean, that to me is a cool storyline. It's got to be one of the, I mean, help me think off the top of my head who else we're going to have competing at both the Pro Superstar Shootout and World Series of Pro Mod in the professional classes.
Eric,
I know he's the only one.
He's pro stock and in pro stock at the Pro Superstar Shootout.
Yeah.
It's fair. I wanted to talk about this because I think it's a clip, but to close the book on this Nitro round, this Nitro musical chairs we've seen, I think it really it's exciting. At the bare minimum, I can't imagine some of the pressure these teams feel because they know their crew chief is more than likely a better offer away from leaving. And I think we've seen some issues with that on the heels of kind of the closing up shop, if you will, of Don Schumacher Racing. Like whenever he sold the interest of his Top Fuel team to Joe Maynard, when those things started happening, it felt like people were quickly looking for security. So you have these crew chiefs and high level crew guys looking for what they identify as a long-term opportunity, but it's put a lot of people back into circulation. And there's been a tremendous amount of movement the last couple of years. And I think what we're going to start to see, I mean, we've seen kind of a rotating cast of characters in Paul Lee's Nitro Funny Car Camp. He's got a new crew chief for 24, Yanni Lindbergh, which I think is a great storyline. A young guy calling the shots on a program like that is definitely a great thing for the sport of drag racing. Jason Bunker, another one out here that's made moves recently. I mean, it's an interesting dynamic that exists. Dean Marinas diving into the fray as a crew chief, as we mentioned earlier, for Chad Green, or part of a crew chief tandem there at Chad Green Motorsports. I'm interested to see if we see some efforts to kind of lock people down. I wonder if we're going to, I would almost be excited. I think about parallels to stick and ball sports quite frequently. And I don't know that it would be a bad deal to see some of these inner workings of teams be part of a more well-known storyline. I think our sport is big on secrets and behind the scenes and not letting people in. But man, I mean, look at the sports news today. Is Mike Tomlin re-signing with the Pittsburgh Steelers as a coach? He's been there for 10 years or whatever. Bill Belichick's out at the Patriots and interviewed with the Falcons. And I understand it could introduce a whole world of issues. But again, we have to change our behavior. We have to evolve with the times. And what I see in popular sport culture right now is an air of transparency. Things are talked about. Things are discussed openly. I wouldn't be at all. I mean, they're seeing a great comment here from John Galbraith. Tony Stewart had all his crew guys sign contracts. I think I want to see more of that. I think that we could, one of the ways, an issue that we know exists in the sport of drag racing, Mike, is quality crew people, right? I mean, it's perhaps not as fashionable to become a mechanic out of high school as it once was. It seems like there are opportunities abound for mechanically minded, engineering minded young people. How do you get them to be willing to go out on the road 20, 30 weekends out of the year? How do you add some sizzle to that career choice? And I think that you do that by building their storyline into our sport. I mean, we are so freaking driver focused. It's a rarity when we talk to a crew chief. It's a rarity when we talk to a team owner. That needs to change. I mean, Jerry Jones is as much a part of Cowboys football culture as any player on the field or has been on the field. Could we not change that career path for these people by putting some sizzle on it? I mean, if you assign a new crew chief, this should not be something that happens behind closed doors. It should be something that has a press conference associated with it and a promotional campaign associated with it. I mean, I know a lot of these teams, when they sign a big name player or they sign somebody that they think might help them move some merch, those things happen quickly. Like, hey, we got to celebrate the fact that we just signed Tim Tebow, because we're going to sell a bunch of jerseys.
Yeah, it comes from those documentaries also. Have you seen the teaser for the new NASCAR Netflix documentary, which is going to be, I assume, much like the F1 deal, which shows all, whether good, bad, or indifferent, shows all the behind the scenes stuff. I think you're going to see a lot of that from that NASCAR deal also. This is something we talked about with the Pro Superstar Shootout that Flow Racing is taking on with Courtney Enders with the Road to Bradenton. Not necessarily seeing, behind the scenes drama or dirt, but getting a closer look into some of these competitors, some things
who these people are
away from the racetrack, which I think is important. But I was dying laughing while you were commenting, because Operation Truth here in the comments, according to him, drag racing is dying. It's just all old, fat white people. So we got some work to do.
I'm not sure.
I guess
I'm loosely offended, man. I've lost about 10 pounds, and I guess I tick all the other boxes, old, white, but I've been really, really trying hard to watch.
I mean, I know what he's saying, but what's funny is by the numbers, and a lot of it just due to sheer numbers, drag racing is the most diverse motorsport. It covers all walks of life. We talk about that. But I think maybe to his point, maybe he's got a good point here, that a lot of what we see are the same people, and we just see the surface level, of these drivers. Maybe they are old, maybe they are fat, maybe they are white, whatever. And we don't see everything that's going on at the grassroots level, or a lot of these other classes, or the diversity that the crew members and teams are comprised of. So, maybe there is some truth to that. And that's part of the issue with drag racing, is we have to dig a little deeper, and we've got to get some traction on a full-blown behind the scenes documentary type thing that these other motorsports and other sports are doing. We got Hard Knocks. I mean, they're doing Hard Knocks. It's year round now, basically. That used to be just a preseason only thing. Now we're doing in season. They can't get enough of that stuff. So the more of that stuff that we can get, the more I think we will attract a new fan base. We talked about that to open the show, versus, the fan base we have. They're here, and we're going to continue to do things to cater to them. But reaching that new audience is what those other things are all about. Like, I admit, I'm not a huge NASCAR guy. I don't follow it religiously. I know a lot about it, know the people. I'm here in NASCAR country, but I'm excited to watch that documentary for the way it's presented, to just show, a sport that we just, oh, that's just cars going around and around. It's boring. It's when I take my nap on Sundays because it's just so long. It's so boring, presented in like a more dynamic and exciting way. And I know a lot of people that are involved with that from the, team and driver perspective feel that same way. So that's, to me, is what we need. That's kind of the genesis of some of this stuff we've done with the pro race. And it really all comes back to, like you said, showing more of what's going on outside of what's happening between the starting line and the finish line.
I mean, most of the time these guys get on camera and it's a little bit of a tough situation because I could make a big case for how they have the ability to communicate and they have the ability to get their message out there and they have the ability to let people learn about them. But the role of NHRA and Fox and everybody that's involved in the primary broadcasting and disbursement, I guess, of this information and these people in our sport, we have to find creative opportunities to talk about these people and talk to them while they're not at the racetrack. And because I think that's where a connection may lie.
It's hard to do that. That is harder from a media investment or effort standpoint. Doing that is about 100 times harder than just walking over to somebody's pits and catching a quick interview or whatever. I mean, when they're like shooting fish in a barrel at the track, oh, that's the easy part. Tracking them down in the off season when you want to be off also, because you've got to follow them for the whole season. That's where it really takes investment and planning and like having fresh eyes on it. Not the same people that do all the stuff during the season. Get a fresh crew, get someone else who's not burned out from, following the beat all year to do that during the off season. But Nicole Erickson makes a good point here also, which we've talked about a lot, is in NHRA and in a lot of this stuff, no one wants to be the bad guy. And they're afraid they're going to lose their sponsor if something controversial or dramatic comes out from one of these things. So everyone just wants to be vanilla and be the good guy. And I think we're seeing a little bit of that wall kind of breaking down as time goes on. But she's absolutely right. And that is outside of the effort it takes to track these people down and do this stuff. We're facing this right now. We're calling Nate, Kayla, our editorial team are calling all these guys, getting stuff set up for the pro race from a media perspective, and they're on vacation. They're in the tropics somewhere, and they don't want to talk about this stuff yet. We finally got away from having Pomona in February. Now Gainesville's in March, a month later, but now we're doing this race in early February. So I'm trying to have my vacation time, but I got to give an interview to Drag Illustrated, right? So it's really tough, man. And I don't know what the full answer is to it, but those are definitely some of the problems.
I think it's all tied back to money. I think money is a significant motivator, right? And everybody's motivations are different. You're going to have guys that chase the money, but they're racing for like a bigger cause. And I think that those people are special, but they're kind of like the double threat or triple threat or whatever. They're kind of a special breed. We have to get all of these racers, we have to create an environment for the masses, for everybody that's on the entry list to feel like there is an opportunity for them. I mean, I think it goes back to our conversation. No one's willing. Nicole Erickson makes a fantastic point, and it's actually a conversation that I've had with a slew of television producers, is that they struggle to create that type of content, that type of reality show or documentary style stuff, because no one's willing to participate in the conflict. A story requires a conflict. A great story, a story that people will watch, requires a conflict. It requires transformation. And I don't think that most people aren't bought into being that candid or being that transparent, because what's in it for them? Right? It's not, the juice isn't worth the squeeze. They're not going to air out their dirty laundry or have these conversations in public that they could much more easily have in private. Like, why announce your crew chief, right? And why do all these things if it's not going to produce any meaningful difference? It's not going to. And so that's why there's a challenge. And that's why we've got to foster this, embrace it when it happens, and also lead the way. Right? We have to lead by example. I mean, it's something that we're trying hard to do here. We've obviously, with a limited window of time and having to pick and choose our battles, we dived into celebrating our drivers. But I know during the course of the event, I've communicated with the team at Flow Racing that I really want an onus put on team owners and crew chiefs just to begin this process. Because if we can make these, if you can attract a lot of attention, you can, that's largely connected to your ability to generate revenue, right? And a lot of these teams have found ways to garner attention without winning every race or winning every championship. So I think these things all kind of work together. If we can start that movement towards being more transparent and having more of these conversations in an open forum and being more outright with them when a new team members, I mean, how many team announcements don't get announced? Huge movements inside of various camps that don't get talked about because they don't want to deal with the fallout and they don't want to hear people complain on social about, you know, their favorite driver going away because this other guy took the ride or that other gal took the ride.
It's work too. I mean, and you got, these guys are spread thin and they got to get back to work and try to make it to the race. I mean, it's just another thing.
But it all goes to that overarching problem of having our sports money, having
goes back to money.
Top people, our best racers, our best cars. Drag racing is not their sole source of income, right? They have other businesses that support their racing hobby. And that's a very polarizing comment, right? People get really sensitive about competing for a championship at the NHRA level being labeled as a hobby. But if we're using real terminology, right, and real definitions for a whole lot of these guys and gals, their racing efforts are their hobby. And we have to be working toward, it's not going to happen overnight. And it's not going to be just us. This is a group decision that kind of has to be, we have to, I think part of the problem oftentimes is not only is there not a roadmap, there's not even a destination in mind, right? Like, where do we want to get? And I mean, I think about it, I want to get to a place where there are 16 full-time pro level, full-time operations competing in Top Fuel, 16 in Funny Car, 16 in Pro Stock. And that's a secondary that's a conversation that's in and of itself. We have to create an environment where there are at least that many teams that have made their racing program at least break even cash flow wise, revenue wise, right? At least pay for itself. And until all these problems that we're talking about and all these, like the gap, the chasm between where we are now and where I want the sport of drag racing to be, and that's a part of mainstream sports culture. I mean, you can't tell me there's not a path. And I understand that maybe we've got to look at historical precedents and the way things have been and what history has told us about motorsports. But I don't know that anyone's ever came in and tried to change the context and tell the story differently. When I look at the sport of drag racing, go ahead.
Do you think that that's because of the loss overall of big corporate sponsorships? Or do you think that, because when I think back to, like, you know, the glory years, like Prudhomme and Bernstein and just the beer wars, I mean, every car had a major corporate sponsor on it. Were we closer then to, or did we just not know about it as much? We didn't know what the funding level was of that sponsorship, or if this was a hobby deal, or if this was a full-time paid deal, because there was no social media. There was just far less media coverage. And you kind of just assumed when you saw a giant, you know, whatever Matco logo on a car, you assume that was just a full sponsorship. It could have been less than that. You just didn't hear about it. But now we're digging into it more deeply. There's social media. There's a lot more ways that we sort of know the inner workings of what goes on. So maybe we have this perception that it's more hobby racers now, but maybe that's always been the case. There's always been the top handful that have the big sponsor, and it is a working business. And then the rest sort of are in the gray area. I've always thought about that. And I thought maybe that was an interesting thing to discuss.
I think it goes back to money. And I think that money in a couple of different ways. First and foremost, there has to be a pathway to make more. But there's a great comment here from Randy Johnson, and I appreciate all the comments. Let us know where you're watching from. Let us know where you're headed this weekend. We love seeing these comments. We have to find a way to lower the operating cost. That's one of the things that I've heard from a multitude of team owners and drivers, especially the journeymen, the people that are chasing the dream, is that it's just so expensive. And I don't,
so even if you did have a corporate sponsor and it was significant, but not crazy, you could call that a full-blown sponsorship and operation and a funded deal because the operational costs were so much lower.
Yeah,
Now
I mean,
the
I have a
threshold
lot
to
of-
get to that point is like so high that almost everybody falls under the hobby deal because you know they're in the red, and only a few teams are actually able to make it in the black because of the operational costs.
I think that's one of the most significant
I have
challenges.
to write a book on
that.
this.
I mean, that challenge there's a couple of points to be made. First and foremost, I know that this isn't something that's going to happen overnight, but I do believe there's a pathway. I've talked to so many tuners and crew chiefs and team owners who are so quick to come up with, this is a resourceful group of people. So there's the dichotomy here is that as much as there is a problem, potentially, and as my friend Paulie likes to say, we don't have problems, we have opportunities. But
that's why Paul's successful.
That is why Paul.
In case you ever wondered.
I mean, I'm telling you what, man, outlook matters. And I think the opportunity that exists on one side here is we've got to find ways, and there are opportunities. We got to find new ways to bring revenue in. Secondarily, while simultaneously reducing the overhead. But I think the magic could happen when you understand where you're at. Like, so I think one of the things that, and I'm sure this maybe these studies have done, maybe this research has been done, but if a guy could perhaps understand like what the minimum amount is, like what kind of exposure, what kind of brand opportunities, what kind of difference can a race team make for a business? Let's just say that it cost $1 million to sponsor a Top Fuel team for a year. You have to find a way to provide them many times more than that in value. So that value can come in a lot of different ways. Are those new customers? Is that brand awareness, brand recognition? Is that hospitality? Is that corporate reward systems? I mean, there's a lot of different ways to skin that cat. I mean, and a lot of teams in our space are being very creative. I mean, look at Pro Stock. Camry Caruso does a fantastic job navigating a slew of different sponsors. We've seen Alex Laughlin do that for years. We've also seen some teams that have real deal support. Erica Enders, I think this is a really meaningful thing for people to know, is that is a fully sponsored race team. The operation of that team is more than covered via sponsorship support. And it speaks to the job that team has done and Erica has done in building her following and being able to demonstrate significant value. But like, even if we get it close where it costs $1 million to run a team and you can provide $1 million worth of value to a sponsor, what's in it for the race team? And that's, I think, part of the problem is that these racers, and we've seen it infinitely, and I think it's been demonstrated recently. One of my go-to sayings is the bigger splash they make upon arrival, the quicker the exit. I mean, I've seen it time and time again. When we see a guy come in and run a limited schedule in a high-ranking category and then slowly expand that schedule, maybe commit to a full schedule, that process, we've seen it unfold successfully much more frequently than we have the team that comes in, run 2 races with a single car operation. By race 3, they've got a funny car 2 and a Top Fuel dragster. By race 10, they've got a Pro Mod car, a Top Sportsman car, a motorcycle, and they grow too quickly and it's not sustainable. And success is very difficult to achieve in that. But my point there is that we have to find a way to have something be left over for the racers to make the juice worth the squeeze. But the other side of that is because of the station we find ourselves in. Have you looked at the entry list for any NHRA national event? I mean, it is business owner, CEO, high-ranking executive, board member at Ford Motor Company. I mean, these are some of the most connected, successful, powerful, influential people in the world, not just in motorsports. I mean, these are people that have billion-dollar operations, multi-million-dollar operations, and you can't tell me that we can't take that group of people and set them in a room and say, hey, we have to reduce operating expenses by 10% from this year to next. Let's come up with something. And I mean, obviously, we've worked with a committee now for the last almost year, and we understand the challenges, that's not easy, but it does take an army. And there are enough people, enough talented, smart, resourceful people that I feel if an effort was put into solving that problem, this is a group of people that can solve it. The drag racing community, these are problem solvers by nature, and they're rapid problem solvers by nature. And we need to give them an opportunity to solve this problem. But I don't know that that opportunity has really existed.
And it's also tough because we always see racers are going to race. In that same group that you're tasking with, I don't know, scaling back and slowing down and reducing costs are quickly going to go right to work, figuring out a way around it, how to make their car quicker despite any rule change or any limitation. And it's a real funny situation, and it really has no answer. Honestly, I believe all motorsports struggle with this. We've seen it. But because drag racing is like, I don't know the word. I'm trying to come up with an analogy. I'm usually pretty good with analogies, but the people creating the rules, running the series are also the racers, the team owners, like a lot of conflicts of interest. I think it is what makes it the most difficult.
I agree. And that, and thank God for those conflicts of interest and the people that are that contribute to them, because in many ways our sport would have went belly up 50 years ago if it weren't for JT likes to make fun of me when I use my philanthropic when I say that. But that's
actually a word, JT.
It is a word.
That is how you say it,
man.
too.
Drag racing has been like a significant benefactor of people, the passionate people that exist in the sport of drag racing and their philanthropic nature. You don't have to call a whole lot of people. Everybody sponsors races. Everybody helps and contributes and tries to pitch in. Not everybody, but there is a lot of people, racers specifically, and this could bring me to a whole other topic that I would like to touch on before the end of the day. But we do have to find a way to have that conversation in an open forum. There could be an answer in the comments somewhere. There are smart people that abound in the sport of drag racing.
I think it's getting there. I think the Pro Superstar Shootout has been a little bit of an icebreaker, if nothing else, to kind of get that ball rolling. That was part of the intention of doing this, was to just get that ball rolling, see how it goes. And we'll see what comes of it. But
if every time I hear someone,
these conversations that have happened and the collaboration that's happened and just being kind of exposed, we've been exposed to the inner workings of things we didn't know before. They've been exposed to inner workings of some of our world, some of the, putting on a race, track operations, all these things. It's been like an educational situation for everyone. And I think that is helpful. And some of those walls are breaking down.
I think those walls coming down is probably the most significant thing that's happened in regards to the Pro Superstar Shootout. Having these conversations, working collaboratively. This shit's all buzzwords. It's all, current marketing convo. Synergy. We can throw them all around. Circle back is one of my favorites.
I like that meme. Everybody, what's the circle back after the holidays? And then I saw a meme like early January. Oh God, they're all circling back.
They're all circling back. It's so true. But I think anytime I have a racer tell me a Golden Days story, which is frequent, I remember when. It's almost always when contingency was $20,000. It only paid $1,500 to win super stock, but you'd get $15,000 in contingency. We can't sleep on that money. I think that too many race promoters, I think too many people that are in influential positions take for granted what it takes to drag race. I really do. I think that it's very easy to think that everybody's a millionaire. Everybody's got a small business that they can run their racing program through or find a way. I don't think there is a great enough appreciation for the time and money it takes to go drag racing, especially at our sport's highest level. I don't think there is I think it's understood, perhaps. I'm not saying it's turning a complete blind eye to it, but I do think that there is not enough emphasis and effort put on taking care of these racers and making them feel like there's something in it for them. Because what I see, even especially if there's not going to be any fun, if there's not going to be fun and freebies and jack around time and a loosey-goosey thing, you better find a way to make walking around with all that red tape and all these rules and regulations and whatnot and procedures and practice. You better find a way to make it worth it.
Yeah, it's gotta be fun, man. That's the other thing about the Pro Superstar Shootout and all of our events that we're trying to bring. let's have fun. Let's do all the work to get ready and get there. But when we get there, damn it, we better be having fun. Or why did we do all this?
Yeah, I mean, I think that is something that's lost on people because if you can introduce fun, if you can introduce excitement and some energy and some atmosphere and some tension and some drama, that will bring people. That will keep them. That contributes to that. But again, if that doesn't exist, I mean, especially think about the guys that exist inside that NHRA world that aren't having a tremendous amount of success, especially not on a consistent basis. You've got to find a way to make that guy or gal want to keep doing it, finding a way to climb back up there. And I mean, again, I think that's a couple of the things that I'm most proud about with both the Pro Superstar Shootout and the World Series of Pro Mod. A lot of attention and emphasis is put on the invite-only nature of these things, but I want to create events that people aspire to participate in. And if you make them come one, come all, buy your tech card and you're in the hunt, it loses that. And I think that we need more of those aspirational places to race where I truly believe that there is someone driving a junior dragster this year with aspirations of eventually racing at the Pro Superstar Shootout or eventually racing at the World Series of Pro Mod. And if you don't have that barrier to entry, that can't exist. Right. Because I mean, and I think it would also task racers with being a little bit more long-term or thought out with their plans. Because what I see a lot of, I think about some of these young guys that we've seen pop into the sport for a single race or for 2 or 3 races. I think if they knew precisely where they wanted to go and there was a real big prize at the end of that road, I think that they would maybe pace themselves a little bit more. But instead, we see people dive in and burn themselves out or go broke like that because there's nowhere else to go. Like, this is it. I crossed the threshold. I went to an NHRA national event. I entered. I got parked 16 miles away from the starting line because I'm not one of the guys or not one of the top teams. And that experience, I don't know. I mean, I'm not trying to diminish it at all, but I do think it's important to have these aspirational events that that rise above the big long list of schedules, and various events that happen across the country.
Let's talk about some of the fun stuff that we are going to have at the Pro Superstar Shootout and World Series of Pro Mod if you want to. I feel like we've got a pretty good list of like outside the box fun stuff that's going to be happening.
Yeah, man, let's do it. Before we do that, let me pay some bills real quick. I want to take a minute and remind everybody that each and every episode of the Wes Buck Show is brought to you by our friends at Redline Synthetic Oils. Redline has a reputation with racers and hardcore enthusiasts for creating products that perform and protect better than any on the market, and they've been doing it since 1979. Whether it's your race car, your tow rig, your motorcycle, or your lawnmower, when you think about lubricants, you need to think about Redline. Redline Synthetic Oil has been protecting engines, as I said, since 1979. Their formulas were born in the lab and have been tested on tracks around the world. From 11,000 horsepower nitro burning engines to 50cc motorcycle engines, they have the lubricants and coolants you need. Redline's lineup of coolants, gear oils, greases, and motor oils have protected racers in championship quest across all forms of racing. Log on to redlineoil.com and make sure you support the companies that support this show and support the sport of drag racing. We saw Redline emerge in a big way in the sport of drag racing over the course of the last couple of years, and very excited to partner with them on that expansion. We see them arrive as the NMCA title right sponsor. We see them announced at PRI as the presenting sponsor, or the title right sponsor of the PDRA Tour in 2023. Of course, big supporters of the World Series of Pro Mod and the Pro Superstar Shootout. So make sure you support the company.
I think I see an announcement every day of somebody getting sponsorship or partnering with Redline. So that's a lot. That's a lot of invoices, Mark. And that script read right there is going to be a pretty significant invoice also.
Mark and I have been talking a bunch lately, man. I mean, you talk about a guy who's got his hands in a lot of stuff.
I'm like, dang, Mark is going to be busy this year, man.
Yeah. I mean, and I think that what I like about it, and maybe some of these conversations that we were just having about making the return on investment work for the company need to be talked about a little bit more, because we could have some meaningful conversations with people in this industry about what moves the needle for them. And I mean, I'm going to tell you again, it all comes back to money. It all comes back to driving sales. And I think we just need to have some strategic conversations as this whole group to find ways to make it better for racers. Because if we make it better for racers, we will attract more racers. We will have a better expanding show. I mean, I think talking about carrying on your thought there, Mike.
JRC Photos told me good transition also.
Congrats.
That's what I'm here for. When Wes is, just
I was plugging in my laptop, so you really came in clutch.
Barreling down a wormhole.
Well, here's a couple of things that I think are important that I'm glad that I see a lot of comments about Street Outlaws.
Not a wormhole.
Yeah, I see a lot of comments about Street Outlaws. And I think one of the things that I learned from them, and my beautiful wife just dropped me off a fresh cup of coffee. I just don't know how I got this lucky. It's unbelievable. But
you don't need coffee. Where's the vodka, Alicia?
I quit drinking vodka.
You need to drop some in there.
No, I mean,
I did not.
Nah, dude, I did. I just
we don't want to that.
Well, I mean, it's JT's fault.
It is JT's fault.
After the NHRA US Nationals, I vowed to never drink vodka again.
That's pretty bad. It was that bad that
and I don't even feel like we
vodka
had,
for us.
What sucks is I don't think we had that much fun. Like I remember being like super stressed out.
Not the next day. We definitely did not.
Or not PRI during the US Nationals. Like I was in a zillion meetings and it was stressful. And you talk about
sweaty
Labor Day weekend. It's hot as hell out. Everybody now at this point in time, we're in full turn and burn on the Pro Superstar Shootout. I'm doing a meeting and every trailer I'm having a meeting, and those are those 6-month out conversations where there's like quite a bit of runway left. And so everybody's throwing everything out there. I got this guy said you're going to fail miserably. And this guy from the NHRA hates you. And this guy,
you agreed to everything. You were too hungover and you just agreed to everything that everyone suggested.
Okay. I knew you guys had to be hurting.
I just know that when we checked into the
hotel's the problem.
Listen,
not JT.
It's true.
Actually, it's the combination of JT, the bartender at that hotel, and the fact that the hotel has a bar to begin with.
Listen, I went to this. The people on this screen, went to that hotel once last year, once the year prior, right? So that's a couple of days per year that we go to the Hilton Garden Inn in Brownsburg, Indiana. But when we walked through those sliding doors with JT, Mike, and myself, when we walked in, the bartender welcomed JT back. They haven't seen each other in every year. We don't even know. I think his name's Jason. Jason, the bartender at the Hilton Garden Inn.
You're going to get him in trouble.
Tattooed up. He sees us. I mean, he spots JT like a.
Oh, he did. I mean, and I had a guy
like he was looking for you. Do you have his number?
I had a guy from my hometown with me,
lit
and I was like trying to avoid the bar because we had to go do something else.
Bullshit.
And I was walking right by. I really did. And Jason goes, JT. I turned around and I'm like, oh shit. And then that guy goes, how does he know you by first name? I'm like, beats me, man. Must have looked at my room number or something. I don't know.
Well, I mean, listen, this guy trying to take care of his, I guess, dear friend JT that he sees annually, like in passing. He wants to make sure JT's taken care of. I ordered one vodka drink.
He goes, where's Wes?
He makes sure you're taken care of.
He does. And it's like, it was like a single cocktail. He does.
Yeah.
I felt like I was drinking rubbing alcohol, but because we've got 10,000 people in the hotel lobby, you've about got to be down there interface. Like you got to make the most of those moments. Like it's easy to say you need to go to your room and go to bed. But like when you, in this remote world we live in for the most part, especially in our sport where you don't see each other very often. And if you do, you're busy, you're at the racetrack. You got to make the most of those networking opportunities. So you try to spend a little bit of time down there, seeing folks, shaking hands, kissing babies, talking about things. But bro, JT starts ordering drinks. I had 3 drinks that first night and I felt 3 drinks, like, which I'm not here to say like, but they were so strong that I felt like I had drank a gallon of vodka.
They were probably, they were triples at least.
When I went to bed, And that next day, I've never felt that
quadruples.
shitty. Like I literally, and I said, I can't, I have too much shit to do and too much stuff that I want to do. Can't feel like that ever again. And I'm not saying I quit
It's just that
drinking.
you remembered the three drinks, and then you just forgot the
Yeah.
rest of the drinks.
I
Yeah,
think
that's
more
how
what
it
happened
works,
to me.
man. Yeah. No, it's
Hey,
but those,
speaking of-
you make lifelong friendships in moments like that. You really do.
That's for
Oh, yeah.
sure. I mean, it's for
Well,
sure.
speaking of indie, I actually had JT dig this up while we were talking, because this is something we talk about, generating interest or I don't know, drama or whatever on the internet. I said it when I saw this. Nothing gets people fired up about drag racing more than seeing the tower of their favorite drag strip being torn down. Whether it be Houston recently, here's the Indy Tower being torn down here in the last couple of weeks. This right here gets shared and talked about more than anything. And I don't think there's anything to worry about here with Indy. And I think they're going to do something bigger and better. But what do you think about that? Like, what's like the emotional connection?
Oh, dude,
that we
it's
have
how it's in our DNA.
Yeah.
Bad news travels fast. And a lot of people think that that's like somehow symbolic of like our bad nature as humans or something. It's not. You don't have to look very far back. It's how bad news travels fast because it needs to. Because 1,000 years ago, when there was a buffalo coming toward the village, that news needed to travel fast because there was no other way to spread it. And it's like that behavior is ingrained in us. And so anytime there is like something, in my opinion, I mean, it's no different. Our views would go through the roof if we just chose to be more negative and chose to be more controversial. Matter of fact, we're in a time where that is like an approach. I mean, you see Fox, ESPN, everybody dives into creating these debate shows, hot take shows, and they're literally looking for people that aren't journalists or aren't they're looking for people that are willing to be lightning rods for controversy. And I think that that's what you're seeing with the shares that those photos get.
That's the thing, though. You have 80, like probably, 80, 90% of the people that are looking forward to the new tower and realize how nice it's going to be and realize it's going to be a step up, but those people aren't going to say much until they see it, and then they share it and they're like, oh man, this thing's so nice. And you got 10% that are just, want to bitch about everything and are assholes. That
vocal minority.
Yeah. I mean, and they're the ones screaming about it. So that's all you see, at that point, I think.
I mean, here's my takeaway.
I think it's, I got a couple
Indy
things.
needs some work.
Well, maybe it does. I think it's nostalgia. I think drag racing in particular is like attached to nostalgia. Nothing could ever be better than the Indy Tower. And I remember I went there with my grandpa in 1987 and then, the whole thing. And we don't want to lose that. I think, that applies across a lot of things in life. But for whatever reason, man, it's like we talk about change.
I mean,
we talk about change, improvement, making things better. But we're too scared to let go of the things that we have to let go of,
right,
to make things better. I mean, that's my takeaway. Whenever
I don't want to live, I don't want to live in my first house my whole life. You know what I mean?
But you had to sell it or tear, or it's got to. If you want to build a new house on the land, you got to tear the house down. But it's like we're always afraid to do that. We want to change. We want to do things. We want to make everything better. We say that, but then when it comes time to actually do it and maybe risk something that we were attached to in the first place, there's always that hesitation, and especially drag racing.
I love it. I love it.
No, I mean,
people are wired different, but I do. I love change.
JT definitely does love
it. You don't belong in drag racing, bud.
Well, I mean, it's
we don't
We've done
do
that for a long time, right?
Around here.
But again, we have to start doing some things different. And to finally circle back around to answering your question, Mike, about the Pro Superstar Shootout, and it actually, I mean, there's a lot of things in Bradenton Motorsports Park that, it's an old tower that's been there since the 70s, right? And there's things like that.
Yeah, we might go down there, Vic's bulldozing that tower.
And I've thought about that. I mean, I've literally suggested it, but at times I do think
I've got good insurance. I can just drive the truck through.
Context matters, and I think for what we're doing for the World Series of Pro Mod, for the Pro Superstar Shootout, you guys know my song and dance: big wedding, small church, and that's exactly what we're going for. I think drag racing plays better in a honky tonk, and that is not a knock. I mean, I frequent Billy Bob's, the world's largest honky tonk in Fort Worth, in the historic Fort Worth
Billy
Stockyards.
Bob's must have a sponsorship deal or something on this show.
I'm just saying that I think
Yeah,
some
like a
bands,
backdoor
it's
deal.
a different experience seeing Garth Brooks or whatever, whoever's your favorite country
Here we
person or
go.
favorite Kid Rock. It's different hearing them at Billy Bob's than hearing them at some super stadium, right? At Arrowhead or whatever. It's a different experience, but they're both positive, right? And that my point is, I think the NHRA US Nationals being what it is, the granddaddy of them all, the big go. I mean, those names are trademarked. Those words are trademarked. I mean, that is NHRA's biggest drag race. It is.
How old is that tower? That's not the original? I mean,
no,
that was built sometime in like the 80s or something, probably, right?
I'm not sure, but I mean, I think that facility, that event, 1,000 race cars, people as far as the eye can see, major media presence. That event needs to be significant. I mean, the
1983,
venue needs to be significant.
What's up,
right? I mean, I think that event needs to have a Taj Mahal. That's an event that would play well at a modern racing facility. So I'm glad. I think this is a fantastic move from the NHRA. It's great to see them make that investment in a property that is so important to the sport of drag racing. I can't wait to see what they build. I mean, I hope it's something super dope and very elaborate. I would love to see I haven't actually seen, what's the narrative around people are mad about the tower being, is that what you're saying? People are mad about?
No, just when you first see that photo, like without reading what's going on or anything, it could say, brand new tower coming next week or something. We're not reading that. We're just sharing this picture. Can you believe they're tearing down the tower in Indy? Oh my God, what's happening? We're losing another track, whatever.
I like tracks.
Narrative.
I like tracks that have a distinct visual. And I think that Indy had that with the archway over the staging lanes, the blue roof on the tower and the standing room. Those things I think they're important. Like, how many drone shots have you seen of Indy and you know exactly what you're looking at, just at a passing glance, you know exactly where you're looking. I don't think every drag strip has that. And I'm hoping that they build upon what they have established at Indy, because that place is iconic and they need to, but I would love to see it leveled up. I'm open to change. I want to see a massive,
they did that in Gainesville,
suites and towers. Yeah.
They built that new tower in Gainesville. Man, it's probably been a decade ago now or close to it. And it's kind of got its own unique style. Like it fits the area, it fits the track. And yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing what they build.
And I think they're going to do like a rotating bar and grill on top,
that'd be cool.
All glass. That would be cool, wouldn't it?
Yeah, it's great to see you. I saw this comment here from Daryl Jackson, and it's true. At least they're investing in themselves for the better. A lot of racetracks should follow their lead. And there's no doubt. I mean, going back to the Pro Superstar Shootout, World Series of Pro Mod, the improvements that we've made over the course of the last couple of years at Bradenton Motorsports Park are extremely significant. Increased paving, widened return road, moved scoreboards. We brought in some seating. I mean, there's so many things that have been done to improve that facility, and that's what's required. And we definitely don't see, I mean, that's a song and dance that I've heard since I started going to the drag strip, the owners of facilities that won't reinvest. I think we're seeing the tide turn. I think we're seeing a new era where people recognize they've got to invest in these places. They've got to keep them up. They've got to have clean bathrooms. They've got to perhaps have a shower. They maybe need to have some water hookups. I mean, they're learning that the experience necessary for people to want to come back, because I mean, how many people have you seen go to the racetrack for the first time and you see them in the morning and they're bright-eyed and bushy-tailed and fired up for this experience? Then you see them about noon and they're neon red like me from being sunburnt. They've sweat through their shirts, and I mean, certain amounts of that, they're covered in dirt. There's nowhere to sit. Their feet hurt. We've got to find, I mean, this is again going back to this thought I was having last night, and I don't know where it came from, but it was just like, man, we've got to make this experience better for people. We've got to have places for them to go. We can't just expect them to go entertain themselves between rounds of racing. We've got to bring entertainment to them. Or
what's some of the stuff we're doing?
Tell them where to go at the Pro Superstar Shootout coming up in just under a month.
Yeah, I mean,
we've got bands
running from 10 a.m. 10 a.m. to 2 a.m. You don't really. I mean, some days are just crazy long.
Yeah, I mean, it's super crazy. And if you are just, I mean, I think basically what drag racing typically does is it's like, all right, we're done racing, entertain yourselves. It's like the stuff we say to our kids. You know what I mean? It's like, all right, movie's over, entertain yourselves, go to your room. And that's kind of what we see happen at drag races across the board. And it's not one specific sanction or series or one specific track or anything like that. There's this happens everywhere. And I think we have to start to change that. It's not something that needs to happen overnight, and it's not something that can happen overnight, but we're going to start moving that direction at the Pro Superstar Shootout. We've got bands booked for every night. We've got DJs. We've got a VIP hospitality experience that there's never been anything like this ever at a drag race, ever in history, than what you will see for our VIPs at the Pro Superstar Shootout. We've got a top-end club that's a bar to hang out at. We've got the Johnson's Horsepower Garage Beer Garden down near the starting line. We've got the Capco Corral for our VIP that are down around the starting line. We've got the Drag Illustrated Welcome Center to welcome our guests onto the property and point them wherever they need to go. It's
food trucks,
concessions. I mean, we've got so many things happening at this event to support what is happening on the racetrack. Because again, drag racing is the great American motorsport. It don't get no better than this. I said it last week. I'll say it again. It bears repeating. The best thing that can happen at any other motorsports event is a drag race. We do it every weekend. Our sport needs no introduction. It needs no explanation. Drag racing is a pure motorsport. It is the great American motorsport, but we have to start telling the story in a different context. We've got to create some shoulder programming. I've heard that used around different sports properties where the NFL, they've got their games, but they have shoulder programming. They've got news stuff. They've got these documentary series. They've got little clips and reels and all these different things that support the on-track action. We've got to create that environment here. There's a real barrier between a lot of these sanctions and series and the media and the content creators. We need to bridge that gap, right? I mean, we're working hard to welcome the media in and make them feel valued and recognize that we have an opportunity to leverage all their individual audiences. And I think a lot of places in drag racing are so protective of their, what's more buzzwords? Let me hit you with a buzzword. Oh, intellectual property. They're so protective of their IP that it's one of those, it's a classic, if you love something, let it go moment. And it will come back to you, because if you can leverage these other people, you can grow your sport. I mean, it will benefit you by letting them help you tell the story and giving them some access to content. There's a great story about kind of the Major League Baseball's approach to social media early on, and how that has hurt them and how they've had to backtrack and look at things differently, because they wanted to own it all. They didn't want players out there creating their own content because they wanted to own that content. You're an MLB player. If that content's going out, it's going out through our channels. And at this point in time,
that sounds weird.
Yeah. I mean, now you've got guys getting paid, I don't know, $50 million a season, and I couldn't point him out of a crowd. I mean, I think I could identify 2 active Major League Baseball players because of how they've handled social media, right? Because they just have not embraced it at all. They've actually shunned it in many cases, and they've not empowered creators or their athletes to build their own brands. And it's shocking to me that a baseball player can be so good that I don't know what he looks like, can't even tell you his name, but he's earning hundreds of millions of dollars. That's a fantastic thing, I guess. Yeah. But you compare and contrast that to like the NFL, where most of the players on most of the teams are like household names, not because of the games, but because of who they're dating or whatever. You could say, social media trouble they've been into, whatever. Some of it's good, some of it's bad. But still, they've created an environment where they've fostered that brand building across the board, and they've gotten behind people, and they've supported endeavors to do this, and they've supported their athletes competing in these other things or being a part of these other events, because they know a high tide lifts all boats. And I think that one of the things that we have to change this kind of goes back to, I don't know, and maybe you can tell me if there's a narrative developing between myself and Donald Long, but if he said something on the show last night, but I saw somebody, Brian McCaddy, somebody asked the question of like, does Donald not like Wes? Or does Wes not like Donald? Or what's the situation there?
No, Donald said he loves you. He says, I love Wes, but then he had to talk some shit about slick tires and pro mod.
Right. Yeah. So
just Donald being
I was just
Donald.
curious. Yeah. I was just curious if there was something I need to be aware of. But,
and that we put the Street Outlaws on the cover of the magazine.
Oh yeah. He still hates me for that.
He'll never forgive us for that.
Oh man, that cover of Drag Illustrated has, it's amazing the significance of that piece of paper.
I'm glad we did it.
Yeah, I am too. But anyways,
Absolutely.
my point there is we have to continue this notion of working together. There's so many egos at play. There's so many people that want to be right, and I get it. I'm guilty of it. I'm not having this conversation with you guys from I'm directly involved in a whole lot of this, so I have to practice what I preach. But again, it goes back to building bridges between World Series of Pro Mod and Duck X events, and building bridges between our events. And I mean, think about, we try hard to support all the sanctions and series that contribute significantly to Doorslammer drag racing. I mean, we try to kiss the ring and kind of bow our head in acknowledgement of these other series by automatically inviting their champions. I mean, I'm proud of that. We're setting a precedent that, I mean, it's the difference between, it would be like there being a dozen places to race Top Fuel and the NHRA offering, a gold card or something to everybody who's a champion in any Top Fuel series, right? I mean, that's the environment that I want to create and that we are creating. I mean, I think it's amazing that it goes without question that the reigning defending NMCA Extreme Pro Mod champion gets an invite to the World Series of Pro Mod. The PDRA Pro Boost champion gets an invite. The Pro Nitrous champion gets an invite. The Northeast Outlaw Pro Mod Association event winner series winner gets an invite. Those are things that I think speak to collaboration. I've heard this a lot in pop culture lately and on social media, but the people at the top are collaborating while the people at the bottom are competing. And there's a lot of truth to that. I mean, the magic happens up here. Collaboration, finding ways to create win-win situations for people. And I mean, I believe we've done that with World Series of Pro Mod. This event has had a positive impact on all other Pro Mod sanctions and series and events.
I mean, like you ought to be ranked, somehow, really. I mean, most sports, like, or take golf, for instance, like whatever you're playing, your ranking goes up or down, but every event kind of counts, right? So it ought to be that way. I mean, it'd be hard to do. There's so many events.
I'm going to do it with World Series.
It's the same challenge that you face with fantasy sports and everything we've talked about with that. There's not one unifying way to do it.
Right.
Yep. But you're definitely right. And I mean, we kind of have our rankings in our own mind, or it changes based on various factors, but there's no like set criteria for ranking these guys.
I think there should be, and I think we should consider doing it. I thought about, and this is, we're going to go down we're going to dive into a wormhole, perhaps a black hole to another dimension as part of the 10th dimension. But I really want to create. So here's my plan for World Series of Pro Mod immediate future is to create exactly that, a World Series of Pro Mod ranking system where we track racers' round wins, how many times they qualified, their average qualifying position, their average reaction times, and take a couple of like baseline statistics, metrics, and apply them to a national ranking system. I think it's necessary. I think as the World Series of Pro Mod continues to expand, we get, more people involved, more sponsors involved. I think we're going to need to have a pathway to the future and a clear cut way of how you get into that conversation. I think it would make other sanctions and series even more exciting for the fans, because it all goes back to the fans. We have to do more for the fans. I mean, we spent a lot of time talking about, how we can do more for the racers. And that's obviously, top of clipboard. I mean, that's something that's a big priority, but we've got to do more for fans. All of the things that we've been talking about today over the course of the last hour and a half, to me, all go back to creating a better experience for our fans. And that experience isn't just at the event. Another thing that we're doing at the Pro Superstar Shootout and also at the Drag Illustrated World Series of Pro Mod is way more pre-recorded bits and pre-recorded video vignettes or whatever you would call them, featurettes that will be played during the broadcast, because we recognize that drag racing does have a certain amount of downtime. And I don't expect people to continue watching through tractors up and down the track and mops and buckets. They're not tuning in to see that. We've got to do better for them. They deserve better, and they get better elsewhere. That's the thing. The bar, this isn't about, blazing a new trail. This is about living up to current expectations. I mean, if the NFL game has some issue on the field, they may show it, but if the lights go out, they have ways to fill that time. They've got pre-recorded things that they've done with players and coaches and media members, blah, 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 blah. They're going to find a way to fill that void. Drag racing historically has just lived with it. Like, well, they're going to walk away and do something else, go mow the yard while they prep the track, and then I'll come back inside and watch the race. No, we have to provide them value from the moment they click onto that live stream to the moment they turn it off. We've got to keep them engaged. So anyways, it all goes back to providing more for our fans. Those storylines that we talked about with crew chiefs and team owners, the quicker we have those discussed in the public forum, the better, because that is more for our fans. We've got to put more meat on the bone for our fans. And that is what gets me out of bed in the morning, is recognizing that at my core, I am the ultimate drag racing fan. I love this sport so much it hurts. And I know that there are a whole lot of people like me. And I know there are a whole lot of people that could be as passionate as I am if they were fed, right? If they were provided that content and provided those storylines and provided these opportunities to kind of find a way to fit in, because maybe the existing crop of characters don't connect with them. Maybe they need to hear it in a different way. They need to see it in a different way. They need to experience it in a different way. They need another reason to go. You have to tick a lot of boxes in 2024. I experienced that with the World Series of Pro Mod. For 3 years, we fought tooth and nail to host this event on Thunder Mountain at the legendary Bandimere Speedway. But I realize in this moment, like your dad probably taught you about business, location. And there is no greater drag racing facility in North America, in my opinion, than Bandimere Speedway, but its location was problematic and its time of year was problematic. And we recognized that there was really nothing we could do to overcome those obstacles. We had to find a way to tick more boxes, bring the event have the event during a time of year that there's no competition and there's no prior commitments or pending commitments. Do it at a location that's damn near at sea level. And it is much more racer friendly and raceable in general. I mean, you've got to find ways to tick boxes. And I think the same thing goes for our fans. What are they going to do when they're not watching, when there's not cars on the track? What are they going to do when all the pre-day warm-ups are over? How are we going to entertain them? And obviously their steps have been made. There's autograph signing sessions and there's Q&As, and those things have to exist, but we have to continue to create a more robust fan experience. I go back to my experience at the Music City Grand Prix, the IndyCar race last summer. I went to Nashville for the IndyCar race, and I don't know shit about IndyCar racing, and I really don't care to know anything about it. It's not my cup of tea. I don't like I don't like anything really about it. But I cannot wait to go back to that event, because the on-track action was significant, and I enjoyed watching the cars zip around a little bit, but it was everything else. So if you can get someone like me who has a passing interest at best in IndyCar racing to be excited to come back because of everything else, I mean, that doesn't really exist in drag racing, right? You better get all you need out of the cars going 300 miles an hour or 200 or whatever the case is. You better get it all there, because there's not much else. So anyways, I think it's important that as a community, we start having more conversations about what we can do to make the experience better than our fans. It's way more than signing an autograph. It's way more than a little bit of availability at the edge of a trailer. Those things have become an expectation, right? We have to find a way to meet that expectation, but also be focused on exceeding it. It goes back to our sports kind of ongoing identity crisis, I think, at times in our we have a real affinity for looking backwards. We have a real affinity for how it used to be and what it was. And again, I think preserving our sports history and preserving many of our sports rich traditions is of paramount importance. Very, very important. But we have to be looking forward. And that's what is exciting for me, is what's next. How big can this become? I don't want to look at the sport of drag racing through the lens of we're already as big as this is what it is. I don't think that has to be the case. I think there's more out there from everybody, for junior dragster racers on up, from streetcar fans to Nitro fans and everything in between. There's more out there for us. So anyways, guys, let me pay a few more bills before we dive in to a few fun conversations around the World Series of Pro Mod. Ladies and gentlemen, the Wes Buck Show is brought to you every Wednesday, by our friends at flowracing.com. If you're a drag racer or a drag racing fan, you got to get on board with Flow Racing. The world leader in sports live streaming, Flow Racing provides unlimited access to drag racing's biggest events. Donald Long's Lights Out, No Mercy, Sweet 16, every stop on the PDRA and NMCA tours, Funny Car Chaos, Midwest Drag Racing Series, World Cup Finals, the Skag Power Equipment Pro Superstar Shootout presented by Johnson's Horse-Powered Garage, and of course, the Drag Illustrated World Series of Pro Mod, and much, much more. Make sure you log on to flowracing.com today and join the movement. All right, guys, I want to get into a couple of very specific World Series of Pro Mod conversations. We have made many of our invitees public by way of worldseriesoffpromod.com. If you'd like to follow along with who has accepted their invitation to the big dance, the one, the only World Series of Pro Mod, the biggest, richest Pro Mod drag race in the history of the known universe, you can log on to worldseriesoffpromod.com and check out that entry list. But I want to ask my gang here. Mike, I'm going to start with you. Looking at our entry list and looking at last year's results and some of the people that have been a part of this story for a while, who do you think needs a strong showing at the World Series of Pro Mod? I mean, we've seen this event. We talked about it at the beginning of the show. We've seen it produce iconic, career-defining moments for a slew of racers, but we've also seen plenty of disappointment. Are there any racers that really stand out to you as somebody that you think needs to have a big showing, a strong showing at the World Series of Pro Mod coming up March 1st, 2nd, and 3rd, 2024?
Needs to and wants to are probably two different things, but I think Stevie, like we talked about to open the show, I don't know that he necessarily needs to, but I'm sure he wants to kind of erase this like dubious history he's had at this event. But really, I look at our event as kind of a springboard for the rest of the season. So if you look at it for like a need standpoint, outside of the $100,000, I think you need to get off on the right foot. It's kind of like going out on first round of qualifying and shaking the tires. If you go out to World Series and have a shitty weekend, it's going to be tough when you start running your Midwest, NMCA, PDRA, when you jump into that. And we saw that actually happen. We've talked about it a lot with Jason Harris. He had a great showing at World Series of Pro Mod, went to the semifinals, carried that, and had a stellar season in PDRA and won the championship. So from that standpoint, I really think it's Melanie Salemi. We saw her actually not qualify for World Series of Pro Mod this in 2023, and she actually ended up, like we talked about, being one run away, where she just needed one more run to probably break into the field and make a run at the main event. But she ended up in the second chance race and won that race. But I don't think that they had the season last year that they had, the last couple. That could be rule changes, that could be combinations. I know those guys are always tweaking with stuff over there, but I think that team especially wants to get out to a hot start and sort of make up for what happened last year, because I know they were very disappointed at World Series of Pro Mod in 23. So as far as a need standpoint, I would say the Salemi team.
I would agree wholeheartedly. I need to see Melanie Salemi have a strong weekend at World Series of Pro Mod. I think the sport needs to see it. Fans want to see it. Going into that race, I think a lot of people, expectations were crazy high. People expected her to win that race. Mm-hmm. The success they've had at Bradenton is well documented. That's a team that is a perennial threat on the PDRA front. Everywhere they go, the Salemis have a hot rod, and she delivers. And the way that it all unfolded, they go on to win the Chicago-style second chance race, our Chicago-style shootout, won $10,000 and ran low ET of the event. I think she went 361 in the final. I'm sure that was almost like salt in the wound. I'm sure they were glad to win and get to make a couple of passes on race day. But I'm sure it actually just made matters worse, that they knew they could have been in the hunt. They knew that they could have been there in the later rounds. Going beyond Melanie, I mean,
I think there's like 4 basically, and I don't know if you would call it need, but that really want to, and for different reasons. Melanie, of course, because didn't qualify, but was still fast as hell. Jason Harris, who was so close, and probably had a hot rod to beat. Lyle, in his new ride, and Stevie. Those 4 right there just kind of jump out at me, and all for different reasons. Stevie getting back in the car and different car, and Lyle with the new car or new team, and all the changes there. So I think that for all those, I think there's so many heavy hitters in this deal that it's hard to cherry pick some, but those are some storylines I think that are fun to watch.
For me right now, I'm kind of going, I think Melanie Salemi stands out. And I've decided this yesterday that like, we have to be willing to use these words, like, and these are major sports words, like what teams need to do better next year, which teams, they need to have a strong showing at the World Series of Pro Mod. Again, we recognize that this event kind of sets the tone for the season. I think if you have some success there, it will translate to the remainder of your year. I also look at Keith Haney coming off a Midwest Pro Mod Series championship. He had a great year in 2023, made a lot of really good runs. I think that program is at its all-time high right now. Brandon Schweitzer leading the charge. He's got some continuity amongst crew members. They're doing well. Like I said, won a championship, but failed to qualify, struggled at World Series of Pro Mod. I think it would do a lot for the Midwest Drag Racing Series. I think it would do a lot for their racer base and their fan base and just everybody that flies that flag to see Keith specifically come into this event and make his presence known. I mean, personally, I need to see it. I want to see it. I think Keith Haney is a polarizing figure. He's a great guy, but he's got to live up to that persona. I mean, my name on the window, the car's got a name, the Black Mamba. He does so many things right. He's really leaned in to his racing career. He has developed a character, and I think it would be massive for that team to go rounds at the World Series of Pro Mod and set themselves up for another championship run, but also kind of demonstrate that they belong in the conversation and that Keith Haney belongs in the conversation. I also look kind of along the same lines, but different. Jim Halsey. Jim Halsey, I would argue, is one of the greatest of all time when it comes to pro modified racing. We've discussed this before, Mike. Does he belong on the Pro Mod Mount Rushmore? I think a case can be made for him. First to the 5s and a nitrous Pro Mod, multiple championships, back-to-back championships in PDRA Pro Nitrous, multiple record-setting runs. But he definitely did not have the outing he was looking for at the World Series of Pro Mod. And I think Jim, if they come down there and do what I know they're capable of doing, qualifying in the top half of the field, and they can go rounds, and I think they're a threat to win this race. Another team that's had success in the outlaw format at U.S. Street Nationals, at the Snowbird Outlaw Nationals in the past. I think that's another team that really needs to get off on the right foot. Narrowly lost a championship in PDRA Pro Nitrous to Tommy Franklin, but I think that they could really set the tone for 24 with a big showing. I'd also like to see something. You mentioned Stevie Fast Jackson. I think he's got a lot to prove right now. I really do. I think he's had multiple sponsor changes. He's gone through a lot of changes over the course of the last couple of years. And I think it's time that he reminds folks who he is and why he has the following that he does and why he's the feared racer that he is. I also look Mark Mickey coming off setting the Doorslammer record just a few short weeks ago down at Bradenton with Jose Gonzalez behind the wheel of that twin turbocharged 69 Camaro. That car is feared around the world. It's probably, it's the fastest Doorslammer on the planet. And I think that Mark Mickey and that car are a threat. They've demonstrated they're a threat in a relatively short period of time, but I think he needs to have a big weekend at the World Series. I think that is an important thing for their season as a whole in 2024, as a team that kind of cherry picks and goes to certain events and, isn't necessarily known for picking one and just running all those races. They bounce around a little bit. They're opportunistic. I think we need to see Mark Mickey. I'd also like to see Manny Bajinga bounce back. In 2022 and in early 23, and throughout most of 23, Manny Bajinga was talked about constantly. I mean, he had made his presence known in No Prep Kings competition. He makes the move into NHRA Pro Modified, makes a huge splash there. And then, but did not have the kind of weekend he wanted at World Series of Pro Mod. And I think he's another guy that we need to see really show out at the World Series of Pro Mod. But it's cool to even be able to talk about these guys. Again, I want to remind folks, if you want to follow along with who's been invited, who's on the list, who's confirmed participation, log on to worldseriesofpromod.com. Moving into a secondary question, kind of along that same lines, though, we got some fresh faces in 2024 at the World Series of Pro Mod. Several of the usual suspects, very proud of. We always make a special effort to bring back the people that have supported us in the past and the people that have shown promise in the past, but we make sure to leave room for some fresh faces. I look at the list and there's a slew of them, but there's a few that stand out to me, and I'm just curious, when it comes to the biggest, richest Pro Mod drag race in the history of the known universe, which one of these fresh faces are you guys perhaps most excited about? I'll drop a few for you here. Joey Oaksis, what a freaking story. We need to talk about that. Yep. Blake Housley, nitrous equipped 41 Willies, everything you want in a race car, nostalgia body, nitrous purges, and a very talented young man. Preston Tanner, he was a part of the race last year. I felt really had a shot at it. Yeah. Car didn't make the run he needed in eliminations and he was out early, but those are three specifically that I think have potential to really make a splash coming up that first weekend of March.
Yeah, we've got quite a few guys. I mean, those are young guys, but there are guys that maybe aren't quite as young that are going to be making their World Series debut. Some that we've announced, some that we haven't yet, but we've got quite a few new faces, which I'm excited about, and quite a few nitrous cars, which I'm excited about as well. And so I got to go with Blake. He ran well down to Bradenton over the winter, and we'll see what he does here at US Street Nationals coming up. But like you said, how can you not pull for a 41 Willys nitrous car? Somebody's been around it for his whole life. Son of Terry Housley, longtime pro mod and top sportsman racer here in the South. So he's my pick. It's the Joey Oakes' story, it's hard to beat as well. We're going to flesh that out as we continue on in the lead up to the event, but definitely three good names, but I got to stick with my nitrous guy.
Yeah. I think Blake, I'm excited about this one. I mean, I think what's happening in the Midwest around the sport of drag racing, I mean, there's been certainly some troublesome things like losing Heartland Park to Pika, but gaining Flying H drag strip there outside of Kansas City, and he's deeply involved in that project, and I'm glad to see it represented at the World Series of Pro Mod. But to your earlier point, 11 nitrous cars thus far. Very proud of that. I don't think you're gonna
we might have one or two more too, right?
I've got a couple of spots, and this is one of the things that I wanted to talk about, just kind of, and I suppose we need to start wrapping up here today. And I just, again, click subscribe, make sure you get all the notifications for the Drag Illustrated YouTube channel. There's only going to be more content moving forward. We truly appreciate your support in helping us spread the gospel of drag racing. Again, it takes an army. It's not just going to be we three on the screen. It's not going to be just the people that operate under the Drag Illustrated umbrella. It's going to take all of us to get the sport where it can go and will go if we don't let off the gas. Guys, one of the things, speaking about those extra spots, we've got a handful of spots left with the World Series of Pro Mod. I believe we're down to the final 4 spots. Very, very challenging to make these decisions. There's a lot of deserving drivers. There's a lot of great race cars and great teams that exist in North America and around the world for that matter. It's part of Shannon Jenkins is the king of nitrous, and that's why I've got him on my shirt. Limited edition Racers Club apparel. You can check it out at racers.club. Anyways.
One of one.
Well, there's actually 6 of them, but
okay.
I digress. But they're
still waiting on mine.
Yeah, still waiting on. I've got yours with tags on it and everything. So
nice.
But one of the things that's been, and this is kind of a great way, I think, to kind of close the show for today. And thank you guys for joining me here. I can't believe how much. I can't believe we get to do this. But I want to talk about some of the crossover, because how cool is it that Chad Green is coming into the World Series of Pro Mod fresh off, his first career win, an NHRA Nitro funny car. Notice that I'm not at all afraid or bashful about recognizing his accomplishments outside of pro modified drag racing and outside of, the confines of Drag Illustrated produced events. I'm so excited to see him, and who knows what kind of success he'll have at the Pro Superstar Shootout. I think he's in the hunt.
Is he coming with the same car? Has he got a new car or done anything different?
Not that I'm
with
aware
his
of. He's got a nitrous Corvette, to the best of my knowledge. But
dude, you just can't beat that.
No, you can't beat it. I mean,
straight out of a Nitro funny car into a nitrous Corvette, man.
He's got to cool, right?
He's got to be a favorite, also.
I mean,
just a fan favorite.
We've got one more very accomplished Nitro driver that we're going to announce this week. I don't want to announce it today, but he's already confirmed a spot and accepted an invitation, excuse me, to the World Series. But how cool is some of this Nitro crossover? I mean, I'll say it here that we worked pretty hard on 2 or 3 deals to get top tier Nitro drivers in pro mod cars. I mean, we were this close with Antron Brown, and I think that that's something that will likely happen in 2025. I've got my sights set on a few of these folks that exist in the Nitro Top Fuel Funny Car Pro Stock world, because I think that's, I saw a comment early in the show that, my tune has changed, that I would never have Nitro or never have Top Fuel at Bradenton. It was never Bradenton. It was never at the World Series. I don't think I ever said it, but what I said is that we will never have anything that surpasses, that is higher on the totem pole than Pro Mod at the World Series of Pro Mod. Because I'll be honest, we had early pressure to combine these events. That was what we were initially asked, is if there was an opportunity to combine the World Series of Pro Mod and add Top Fuel Funny Car and Pro Stock. And I said no. And I still get pushback on that, because there's some people that want that to happen, but it's not going to happen. And it's not going to happen because I see World Series of Pro Mod and pro modified drag racing as it's a unicorn in this space. It is. There are so many of them. And going back to all those problems that we outlined with Nitro racing and the costs associated with it, it's not cheap to go pro mod racing, but comparatively speaking, what you spend to barely be in the conversation and not be competitive in Nitro Funny Car and Top Fuel would have a front running race winning program for you in pro modified. So I think the math is better in pro mod. Not to say that it's cheap, it's very expensive, but there's a pathway, in my opinion, to make pro modified that class that people pursue, because they can make money doing it. There's an upside, right? They can make the juice worth the squeeze. And I can't allow a situation to exist where those guys ever play second fiddle to anyone. It's why we're not having pro modified at all. There was a lot of interest in doing quarter mile legal NHRA Pro Mod at the Pro Superstar Shootout. I think we could have easily filled a 16 car field or more, but I cannot have anything compete with the top players with the World Series of Pro Mod, and I will not. So when I had the opportunity, along with all of us here at Drag Illustrated, to bring Nitro racing, high level Nitro racing, and do it our way at Bradenton Motorsports Park, it made perfect sense. And this has been such a cool moment, because I talked about this a little bit on the racing business with Jason Dukes, but there's enough to go around. There's tons of fans. There's tons of potential fans. There's tons of people, billions of them, matter of fact. And we mustn't continue to operate like the race fans we have are the last ones we have, and the last ones there will ever be. And the sponsors we have are the last ones we have, and the last ones there will ever be. We have to look at this sport, or we don't have to do anything. Nobody has to do anything. I like to look at this through an opportunistic lens. I think drag racing exists on fertile soil. This is my personal opinion. I think there's a lot to do. I think there's a lot to accomplish, but pro modified is a unicorn. It's like mixed martial arts. You can't just be a good boxer or a sumo wrestler or a good Brazilian jiu-jitsu practitioner. You have to be all of them. I think we get some of that magic with pro modified. We've got turbo cars, supercharged cars, nitrous oxide injected cars. We've got new cars. We've got old cars. We've got Fords and Chevys and Dodges. And I've even considered inviting a couple of import cars to the World Series of Pro Mod. And it's high on my priority list to bridge that gap and make sure that the guy that builds a 2JZ 6-cylinder powered Pro Mod isn't operating on an island, or the guy that's got a 4-cylinder 5-second quarter mile Pro Mod isn't operating on an island. that those guys need to be, those cars, those people, that fan base, that community, they need to be, I want to see them as one. I want to be a galvanizing force in the sport of drag racing. And I think that Pro Modified, it's the universal language of our sport. It's successfully contested all around the globe. And there's so much magic there and so much opportunity for a multitude of reasons. I mean, we talked about the cost to do it. Obviously, there's a barrier to entry, but it's not, we're still in a time where, there's multiple examples of pro mod racers that are not gazillionaires, guys that are doing it on a budget, guys that only have, a limited amount of money, or maybe only have one engine and a couple of spare cylinder heads, right? Or, they don't have cars stacked like firewood. And the fact that those guys can still exist and be successful, it contributes to people pursuing that dream. And I think that I'd never want to do anything that diminishes the World Series of Pro Mod. I won't allow it to happen. It's too important, and it's too important to the sport of drag racing. I look down at our list of drivers, and I think about how many chassis are being built for these cars, how many engines are being built for these cars. What this event represents to the drag racing economy, it cannot be, it can't be overstated. I mean, it's massively significant, and I want to continue to grow that, and I want to continue to build upon it. And I couldn't ever allow for any type of racing to come in and supersede the stars and the cars of the World Series of Pro Mod. I really have no idea where that came from or why I started talking about that, but I appreciate you throwing that up on the screen, or throwing me up there solo cam wide shot.
Hey, I had a great idea.
Okay.
Like, we need to get a big ass trophy and do like the Series Cup that goes, it's like a traveling trophy to whatever series takes it home at the World Series of Pro Mod.
That's done. The inaugural first ever JT, come up with something. But yeah. Traveling a cup.
You have to drink a beer out of
the Series Cup. Or
Oh, no. Here's dump a bunch of Coors Light in it.
You got to drink out of it. Yeah, you definitely got to.
Do you think it should be, question, should we do a standalone trophy, or should it be a replica of the winner's trophy?
Standalone.
Okay.
Yeah.
So let's do a standalone trophy. You know what it is? It's the Constructors Cup.
Yeah.
In Formula
like
1.
Yeah.
Not that, but we could do that, where you did a Constructors Cup that went to, there was some movement like 10 years ago to do this in NHRA Pro Mod, and create like a Constructors Cup where it was the team that fielded the car won a championship of some sort. Let's do that. There's going to be a series, and every racer is going to need to identify as with a group, and that's kind of cool.
Yeah.
Right. And I guess if they choose not to
work on it,
when the PDRA was waving their flags, in the water box.
And I'm hoping to see more of that. I mean, it was cool to see the PDRA set up a hospitality venue for their PDRA racers, and I thought that was so cool. That is
cool,
I mean, and it was cool to see Keith Haney was there from the Midwest Drag Racing Series, and Ellen Eschenbacher, and they were there representing for their brand. And we also had John Mazzarana from the Northeast Outlaw Pro Mod Association there representing for his brand. We had Justin Elks there, kind of, he was obviously crew chief in a car, but kind of as a representative of the NHRA Pro Modified Series, and Debbie O'Rourke from Pro Line Racing Engines and Finish Line Consultants, excuse me, there as something of a representative of the NHRA Pro Mod Series. And I think all of that, it just speaks to the magic of what's happening here, man. And if we find a way, like, just imagine if we had, here's what we should do. If there's anybody watching that wants to sponsor this, here's your opportunity. It needs to pay money. How cool would it be for the PDRA to win 10 grand? It'd be cool for the PDRA to get a check from the World Series of Pro Mod for $10,000 because their series won the event. I'm going to come up with 10 grand. I'll come up with 10 grand. We'll get it. Anybody out there want to jump on that? Because I think that's a cool thing. Good idea, man. I like it. It reminds me of the Big Dog Trophy, at Piedmont, the traveling trophy. I know that it's not a new concept, but rewarding the series, it's another way to provide value. So we need to make sure that gets written down and done.
Yep.
All right. So what else do we got to cover, guys? It's been a barn burner of a show. I think that's it. One of the things we were going to talk about, we'll save it for next week. We got to start talking a little bit about Donald Long's $100,000 bounty on the Doorslammer 8th mile world record, which was set on big tires by Frankie the Madman Taylor at Rockingham Dragway in 2014, almost 10 years ago. He went 348 with a 5. And
Stevie thinks they'll beat that at Lights Out next month.
No joke.
Stevie was saying something like a low 40. Low 40s to get that record. We'll see. Lyle disagreed. And I kind of agree with Lyle. I think it's gonna. I mean, it takes something crazy. Maybe these guys got something up their sleeve, or if the conditions are perfect. But
they'll get enough hits at it. That's for sure.
Yeah. Whew. Oh yeah, they will.
That's the recipe. I think if the weather permits and they are given a ton of runs, and people go down there for the express purpose of setting that record, now that there's a prize associated with it, because I think it had to be a stars and moon aligned moment. It always will be, but it was even more so when it was just part of the race, right? And you're not going to run that number unless you have to run that number, because you're going to try to race to win the guy in the other lane. And everybody talks about going up there to, I'd go up there with everything I got every time, but you go up there and trying to go A to B. Like you want to make the best possible run you can.
Oh, that's not the Lights Out. Somebody's saying.
Yeah, my bad. I didn't mean. I meant for the bounty deal.
Yeah,
that's what he was saying. So
yeah,
we'll see. I'm
anxious to see about it.
Yeah, we'll talk more about that next week. And see
Quick is asking about if the cars are NHRA legal. I want to address this just briefly, that the Pro Superstar Shootout will enforce NHRA rules. So all NHRA rules will be followed. We have an incredible tech team. I think we've got about a half dozen guys that we put together to police this deal. We will never allow anything to call into question the integrity of a Drag Illustrated produced event. It's something that we take very, very seriously. Everything else that we do is meaningless if the competition itself isn't as it should be. So anyways, very, very, very buttoned up tech process. We had a lot of racers reach out to us when this was first announced about making it an outlaw race, but it flies in the face of progress, right? Like everybody loves that notion, but there's a lot of historical data that it doesn't work out, and it defeats the purpose.
Yeah. Well, not all of the purpose,
but it defeats a significant.
Some of the value proposition for these NHRA racers is to get ready for Gainesville. So it needs to be as much about that as possible.
Absolutely, man. So, guys, I just want to tell you again, thank you, Mike. It was so good to have you back. I mean,
thanks,
I missed you a bunch. We have the NMCA. Quick is asking about Safety Safari. We have contracted
all the questions.
NHRA,
he somehow knew we were going to have 2 jumbotrons. So I don't know. This guy's got insider info, but he doesn't have all the info.
Yeah, we do have 2 jumbotrons coming in for the Pro Superstar Shootout, which should it's going to be cool because you'll be able to take in the race from multiple venues. You'll be in the VIP area and you can watch it on TVs or peek over and watch it happening in real time. Or you can, if you're in the grandstands, you'll be able to look at the jumbotron alongside the tower. Or if you're over at the music stage, you'll be able to watch along completely removed from the grandstand. So I'm really excited about that. But we have the NMCA safety team coming in. They have the latest and greatest equipment. They have brand new Chevy dualies. They got all the everything required. We've brought in a life flight helicopter that'll be there all week. We've got a trauma doctor on the staff. We have we've brought in multiple Musco light trucks to make sure we have adequate lighting. The amount of we have an ALS ambulance on property the entire time. I mean, it's an amazing the effort that's required to run Top Fuel and Funny Car, but you guys are going to see it at its all-time best. Last thing, and I promise we got to close the show, but here's what everybody's missing about No Prep Kings and what I think what we are achieving with World Series of Pro Mod and the Shootout, the Pro Superstar Shootout, which I hope over the course of the next few years becomes the Shootout. I'm real proud of that, and great job on the name, Mike. Superstar Shootout. That's a Mike Carpenter doing. But
I didn't think I was going to see it or say it 18 million times, but
yeah, it works. Long.
It works, man. Superstarshootout.com. What a domain name. Like just in itself.
I didn't do all the sponsor editions.
I know. It's like
the actual event name.
Yeah. But lastly, I think what we have to do is we have to make sure the fans know what they're getting. That's what they get with No Prep Kings. I think that's part of the sauce. It's part of the recipe is that the fans know who's going to be there. Like almost entirely. They know all their favorite guys and gals are going to be there, and they're able to plan accordingly, and they are able to get excited accordingly. Because in drag racing, let's be honest, it's not an unusual scenario for the most part to like want to see your favorite driver, but this is the race they skipped, or this is the race they didn't go to, or it's on the West Coast, or it's part of some swing that doesn't fit their schedule. What I wanted to create with the Pro Superstar Shootout, and before that, the World Series of Pro Mod, I want my fans to know who's going to be there. I want them to be able to pick a horse and ride.
It's so important. Would you go to a football game if you didn't know a single player playing?
Oh,
then you just have to be like,
what if you didn't even know the teams?
You just have to be one of these Go Sports. I mean,
it happens in Major League Baseball and NBA all the time. Like you go to a game, you take your family. Favorite players, Albert Pujols or whatever, back in the day.
But he's injured and he's not playing.
Or he decided to set out tonight. They're going to rest him tonight.
Well, that even is different than what I'm talking about. Like I mean, that's like a freak occurrence or whatever. But
no,
we task drag racing fans to be a fan of the sport and of the cars and of just the overall deal, not so much their individual team or driver, because of exactly what you're saying. And that is the one thing that No Prep Kings kind of reverse engineered.
Yeah.
And
you have to know, the fans got to know what to expect. Yep. The fans have to know what they're getting. And in pretty much every other situation, they do. They know what they're going to get on the field.
And in all fairness,
and then some.
NHRA, I mean, the touring NHRA series is the closest you really have to that of knowing who's going to be there, of the top names. But every other form of drag racing, it's more of a crapshoot for sure.
But I mean, I think even at the highest levels, you see some of this, and I think that this is a step towards giving a guaranteed product to the fans. And we know that we've got a dozen of the best top fuel cars and drivers in the world. We have 13 actually, of the best Nitro funny cars and drivers in the world. We have nearly 20, I think right at 20 of the best pro stock cars in the world and pro stock drivers in the world. Fans know they're going to get to see. I mean, look at the opportunity that exists really for fans, media members. I remember I used to go specifically to ADRL races early on with Drag Illustrated because everybody was there. I didn't have to go to 10 events. I could accomplish in one appearance, one weekend in Rockingham or one weekend in Valdosta, what would take me prior to that time. If you wanted to see all those different drivers, if you wanted to see all those different cars, you would have had to go to a big dog race on Thursday night and then go to an Outlaw Pro Mod grudge race somewhere at South Carolina Dragway on Friday, go somewhere else on Saturday, and then go to the NHRA national event on Sunday if you wanted to see them all in one weekend. Now, you've got two opportunities to start your 2024 to see everybody you want to see, right? Everybody that's on your list. I mean, and this is for companies too. I thought about it from a sponsor perspective. Man, if you want to make hay, you got to go to those two events because you're going to get to see everybody, pretty much everybody who's making an impact out here, or making a difference out here, making noise. You're going to get to see them over the course of 6 days in sunny Florida. Guys, thank you all so much. A huge shout out to all of our sponsors, flowracing.com, Stroud Safety, Redline Synthetic Oils, Aeromotive Fuel Systems, Racers Club. Thank you guys all for your support. Make sure you support the companies that support us, and we will see you next Wednesday on the Drag Illustrated YouTube channel. Thank you guys. Make sure you subscribe.
Thanks, y'all.
Y'all.
Hey, I got the y'all.
Jinx.
The y'all's a Southern thing. I don't know if you can have that out there.
Yeah, my daughter says y'all. Like,
well, she's Texas.
Every other word. Yeah, I know. We're from the South.
Yeah.
You know?
Y'all.
All right. Are we off the air?